Hello everyone, very good morning and welcome to Byju's Exam Pair. Welcome back to our discussion on international relations. Today we're going to start with India's eastern neighbors, a very important topic, and we're going to study India's relations with Bangladesh. Sorry for the interruption, there was a slight technical change that had to be done. Anyways, today we'll be starting with the eastern neighbors of India. We shall begin with India's relations with Bangladesh. Bangladesh is one of the most important neighbors for India. There are many important topics to cover under this chapter, so let's take a look at them one by one. First, we'll begin with the location and the map of Bangladesh. There are some important points you need to understand with regard to the geography of Bangladesh. All right. So the moment I look at Bangladesh, the first thing that comes to my mind is that India shares its longest land border with this country. Please write down this point. It's very, very important. It's a very important fact for your prelims. Amongst all the neighboring countries, the longest land border for India is with Bangladesh. It stretches to almost 4,096 kilometers, thus making it the longest land boundary of India. Is that clear? So obviously, when you share such a long border with a country, it becomes very important to have good relations with such a country. There will be a lot of security-related issues, border management-related issues when you're sharing the longest land boundary with your neighbor, right? And also look at the location of Bangladesh. Just see where Bangladesh is located. It occupies a strategic location. It is sandwiched between northeast India and the rest of India. It's located right between the two, right? It is right next to the Siliguri corridor over here, which is a choke point for India. We studied this yesterday. We understood why the chicken's neck or the Siliguri corridor is a strategic weak point for India. So Bangladesh is a country which surrounds the Siliguri corridor, and it is present right in between northeast India and the rest of India. It's as if Bangladesh is like a bridge, like a connection between the other parts of India and northeast India. All right. So this location of Bangladesh is what makes it a very important neighbor for India. We not only share this land border here, but we also share a maritime border with Bangladesh. Over here in the Bay of Bengal, we share a maritime border with Bangladesh. We share a lot of resources with each other as well. Our exclusive economic zone in Bangladesh, right in Bay of Bengal, it is next to the EEZ of Bangladesh. India's EEZ is located right next to the EEZ of Bangladesh in Bay of Bengal. So Bay of Bengal is a common resource, a shared resource between India and Bangladesh. Then we have around 53 transboundary rivers that we share with each other. There are more than 50 rivers that we share between the two countries. All right. Across the eastern borders, the western borders, right, even from the northern borders, there are a total of more than 50 rivers that flow from India to Bangladesh. So this is a shared resource again. These transboundary rivers happen to be a shared resource between the two countries. Just take a look at the next map so that I can explain which are the important rivers that are flowing down from India towards Bangladesh. We have the Gangetic river system, the Ganga, which enters into Bangladesh and becomes the Padma river. Right? Then we have the mighty Brahmaputra coming from Assam and flowing into Bangladesh. The Brahmaputra in Bangladesh becomes the Jamuna river. All right. So you have the Ganga that flows into Bangladesh, it's called the Padma, and the Brahmaputra coming from northeast India, which enters from the northern borders here, and it's called the Jamuna in Bangladesh. Then you have the Teesta river. The Teesta river flowing from Sikkim and West Bengal into Bangladesh. You also have few other rivers from northeast India. For example, you have the Barak river. All right. You have the Feni river as well. So all these are major river systems that we share with Bangladesh. These rivers, they all come together. They all merge to form one gigantic river system, which is called the Meghna river system. The Padma, Jamuna, the Barak, all these rivers, they all merge to form one huge river system. It's called the Meghna river system, which drains into Bay of Bengal. So these rivers are a shared resource between the two countries. So we'll obviously share the waters, the fisheries as well, because fish plays a critical role in Bengali cuisine. I'm sure many of you would be aware of this, be it in West Bengal, be it in Bangladesh. Fish is a staple, a very, very important part of Bengali culture. It plays a critical role in the economy of the region as well. And believe it or not, the fish is a shared resource which plays a role in our bilateral relations as well. All right. Plus, we share these routes, these navigation routes. We can use the rivers for navigation as well, because fish plays a critical role in Bengali cuisine. I'm sure many of you would be aware of this, be it in West Bengal, be it in Bangladesh. Fish is a staple, a very, very important part of Bengali culture. It plays a critical role in the economy of the region as well. And believe it or not, the fish is a shared resource which plays a role in our bilateral relations as well. All right. Plus, we share these routes, these navigation routes. We can use the rivers for navigation, for inland shipping. So this becomes a shared resource as far as these rivers are concerned. We share the waters, the fisheries, and we can use them for inland navigation. Right? We actually have national waterways on some of these rivers. For example, the Ganga, the Brahmaputra, also the Barak. On these major rivers, India has already built the national waterways. Just like we have the national highways for roads, with regard to inland navigation, we have national waterways of India. So we can interconnect these national waterways of India with the inland shipping channels of Bangladesh. So by doing that, you can create an alternate route. You can create an alternate route. You can use the inland shipping routes and connect via Bangladesh with northeastern states. That is the advantage here. Because see, if you look at the Siliguri corridor here, the Siliguri corridor is not just a weak point for India, but it's also difficult to create connectivity infrastructure through this region. One of the challenges we are faced with developing the northeast region of India is that lack of connectivity. Because once you cross Siliguri corridor, let's say you're passing from West Bengal, you cross the Siliguri corridor and then you enter the Darjeeling region. From there, you proceed towards the Brahmaputra Valley, towards Assam, and further into northeast India. So across this region, starting right from Darjeeling, the terrain here is very complicated. The terrain in the northeast region is a very complex terrain. You have hilly mountainous areas, you have fast flowing rivers, you have dense forested areas as well. So in such a geography, in such a topography, it's not easy to create infrastructure. It's not easy to build roads, railway lines, bridges. So it's not easy to establish connectivity with Northeast India via the Siliguri corridor. Plus, it is a choke point. It can be easily blocked. So this has always been a limitation with regard to improving connectivity with northeastern states. All right. So to ensure that we bypass Siliguri corridor, we need alternate routes. We have been exploring alternate connectivity routes, and this can happen only via Bangladesh. Bangladesh can provide us that alternate access to northeastern states, and we need not depend on just the Siliguri route. We can connect our inland shipping channels. We can even connect our road and railway lines so that India can be very well connected with northeast region via the territory of Bangladesh. So through Bangladesh and its roads, railway lines, and inland shipping networks, we can connect the rest of India with northeast India. So that is the advantage. So via Bangladesh, we can connect better with the northeast region. I think that's very evident when you look at these maps. Since Bangladesh is sandwiched between northeast India and the rest of India, we can easily connect with the other side, and we need not depend just on the Siliguri corridor. But of course, this depends on whether Bangladesh will give us transit access. It depends whether Bangladesh is going to provide transit access to India. So this has always been a priority for us. Securing the transit rights, getting Bangladesh to give us the permission to connect our roads, railway lines, and inland shipping routes, so we can open other routes, alternate routes to northeast India. That way, we can open up the economy of northeast region, provide for better development. And also, it is extremely crucial to tackle northeast insurgency. See, northeast insurgency has always been a major security threat for India. There have been multiple insurgent groups operating in northeastern states, from Assam to Tripura, from Nagaland to Meghalaya. Across the region, we have seen multiple insurgencies over the decades. In many cases, these insurgent groups, they have found a safe haven in East Pakistan or later in Bangladesh. They have found a safe haven in Myanmar as well. So in our neighboring countries, these insurgent groups have found a shelter where they could hide. They could get state support as well to procure funds, weapons, to carry out their training, to hide away from Indian security forces. So from a security point of view, cooperation with our neighbors becomes very, very important to tackle the threat of northeast insurgency. Especially the ties with Bangladesh and Myanmar is critical for India to deal with the security situation. You also have hostile neighbors like Pakistan and China, which have enabled some of these insurgents via Bangladesh or via Myanmar. For example, Pakistan has used Bangladeshi territory to support insurgent groups and terror groups against India. China has used Myanmar's territory to support many insurgent groups against India. So to contain these threats, to counter these state and non-state actors, it is very important for India to have good equations, good relations with these neighboring countries. So even from a security point of view, Bangladesh is very crucial for India. All right. So this is the reason why we say that Bangladesh occupies a strategic location. Understood? With regard to connectivity, with regard to the shared resources, such as the common rivers that we have, with regard to the economic opportunities we can create by collaborating with each other, and also to deal with the security challenges. Along with this, there's one more motivation for India to work closely with Bangladesh. If we have good relations and good connectivity with Bangladesh, we can further our Look East, Act East policy. India has a policy called Act East policy. It's an upgraded version of the Look East policy. We will study this policy in detail in a separate class. We'll come to it. All right. Right now, just let me tell you what is this policy, what is the main purpose, but we'll study this in detail in a different class. The Look East policy, which was launched in 1991 by the then PV Narasimha Rao government, it was upgraded in 2014 by the Modi government to the Act East policy. So Look East policy became the Act East policy. Under this, we are trying to prioritize our relations with Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries. For the time being, just remember this. This is more than enough for now. All right. We'll get into the details of this later. We have a separate class, one entire class for Look East, Act East policy. So through this policy, we are reviving, rebuilding our ties with all the Eastern countries, with Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. And obviously, when we are looking east and acting east, we need to first focus on our eastern neighbors, that is Myanmar and Bangladesh. They both become integral to the Look East, Act East policy of India. If we have to reach out to Southeast Asia, let's say Thailand or Malaysia or Singapore or Vietnam, if we have to have influence in East Asia, it's very important that we first maintain good relations with our eastern neighbors, that is Bangladesh and Myanmar, because they are the ones who will provide us that connectivity. By connecting with Bangladesh and Myanmar, we can further extend the connectivity into Southeast Asia. So even with regard to this, Bangladesh becomes very important for India. All right. So from an economy point of view, with regard to our foreign policy priorities, with regard to connectivity, with regard to connecting with Northeast India, tackling insurgency, dealing with the security threats, the shared resources that we have. So in all of this context, Bangladesh becomes a key neighbor for India. We even share common ecosystems. We share very, very important ecosystems, such as the Sundarbans. I'm sure all of you would have heard about the Sundarbans, the wetland mangrove ecosystem present over here. It's a shared resource. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In India, it's a national park, a tiger reserve. It's a Ramsar site as well. So it's a common shared resource, the home of the Royal Bengal tiger. These ecosystems are facing a lot of threat because of climate change, global warming. So this is another common concern. Bangladesh is very, very vulnerable to climate change. It's one of the most prone countries to the threat posed by rising sea levels. Is that clear? Because over here in the southern part of Bangladesh, where the Meghna River drains into Bay of Bengal, you have these vast deltaic plains. The Meghna River creates a vast delta, a very huge deltaic plain. It's one of the most densely populated regions in the world. Bangladesh, in fact, is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. Right? So here in the deltaic plains, Bangladesh has a very dense population. Most of its economy is concentrated here. Right? It has strategic ports such as the Chittagong port. It has the Mongla port. It has a lot of agriculture, fishing that takes place here towards the southern part of Bangladesh. Now, all of this is being threatened because of rising sea levels. climate change has become a very, very serious concern for Bangladesh. It has been estimated that by the end of this century, a large part of southern Bangladesh is going to get submerged because of rising sea levels. This is going to displace a lot of people. It's going to create a lot of humanitarian disasters in the region. So this is a common concern. If a crisis on this scale affects Bangladesh, it will affect India as well. So we do have these common concerns with regard to environmental issues, climate change, and of course, disaster management is another priority. Because Bay of Bengal is very prone to high-intensity cyclones. Every year, you'll be reading in newspapers, right? Before the monsoon, after the monsoon season, Bay of Bengal witnesses high-intense cyclonic activity. These cyclones, they not only strike Tamil Nadu or Odisha or West Bengal, they also recurve to strike Bangladesh and Myanmar. So disasters are quite common in the Bay of Bengal. Coastal flooding, tropical cyclones, and even the threat of tsunamis is a very real threat. So dealing with disasters is also a common concern. So that is why Bangladesh is vital for India. Because of its geographical location, it automatically becomes extremely crucial for India. All right. So this is the basic understanding you need to have before we proceed with this topic. Now, whatever I have discussed in itself can be a main question. UPSC can ask you, illustrate the strategic location of Bangladesh vis-a-vis India's foreign policy or India's foreign policy interests. Or why is Bangladesh strategically important for India? These are the 6 or 7 points you have to bring out. You can even draw a rough map and explain what priorities we have in Bangladesh. All right. Now, based on this, let's talk about the historical background. Let's understand how relations have developed between India and Bangladesh historically since 1947 or even before that, since the colonial period. Because obviously, when we are talking about our South Asian neighbors, we have to look at the colonial history as well. See, if you look at Bangladesh today, this country was formed only in the year 1971. Understood? Before 1971, there was no Bangladesh. Before 1971, it was East Pakistan. It was one of the constituents, one of the territories of the state of Pakistan, right? Because when India was partitioned, when the communal partition took place, it was Punjab and then Bengal, which were divided between the two dominions. When partition became an eventuality, right? It was the province of Punjab, the large Punjab province, and the Bengal province, which were partitioned by the British. So half of Punjab fell into India, the other half fell into Pakistan, where you still have the Punjab province. Bengal also got divided. West Bengal became an Indian state, and the eastern part of Bengal is what became East Pakistan. And later, it was liberated from Pakistan's control, and it became a new independent country called Bangladesh. Right? This is the trajectory. Now you need the details. You need the specific details as to what happened. You need to understand the culture, the society of this region. You need to understand what implications does it have. See, if you look at the Bengal province historically, it has always been a modern progressive region. It has been ruled by various empires, including the Mughal Empire. It has always played a pivotal role in India's history. I'm saying before 1947. If you erase all the borders that you have, right? If you go back to the colonial period, you'll see that Bengal was at the center of India's cultural and economic progress. Bengal was always a hub of intellectuals. It was known for producing a number of researchers, scientists, artists, right? And a lot of freedom fighters also came from Bengal. It was a nerve center of our freedom struggle as well. So Bengal has been very, very active politically and economically and also culturally. Correct? So if you look at this Bengal province, it's a very diverse society that you find. There are a lot of unique cultural identities that are associated with the region, with the Bengal region. Over here, the most dominant identity is the Bengali identity itself. This is a regional linguistic identity. All right? It's a regional linguistic identity. The people of the region, they predominantly speak the Bengali language, and it is not just limited to any community or any religion. Across communities, people here speak the Bengali language. There are Bengali Hindus, Bengali Muslims, right? There have been other religions as well in this region, including Buddhism, to an extent Christianity as well. So this region has seen a lot of diversity, but the most predominant identity, cultural identity, has to be the Bengali regional linguistic identity. Along with that, there has been a strong Islamic identity as well. It's been home to both Hindus and Muslims. But what really prevails here, at least during the colonial period, was the strong Bengali identity. It was much more stronger than the religious identity of the region. The region had witnessed a lot of harmony. There was communal harmony in the region at one point of time, before the British interfered, meddled with the region. Of course, there were small divisions between different communities, particularly between Hindus and Muslims, but by and large, the region was stable. It had a degree of communal harmony where the communities were thriving with each other. But the British, through their divide and rule policy, they would break the Bengal region forever. Because see, Bengal was the nerve center of politics, the nerve center of India's economy and culture as well. It was the leading center of India's freedom struggle. So the British were extremely concerned, wary that Bengal region is posing the biggest threat to their hold on the Indian colony. At any cost, they wanted to break the freedom struggle of India, which was taking root. And the best strategy for them was to divide the region and rule the region. The weakest link for India has always been its communal history, the history of communal divide between the two major communities, that is Hindus and Muslims. And the British, they successfully drove a communal divide. They widened the existing communal tensions, further dividing the Hindus and Muslims. This is another example of colonial blunder, which still has an impact even today. Even today, the society of Bangladesh is very much divided. There is a base for radicalism, extremism that exists in Bangladesh, which spills over into India as well. And this communal history of the region can be traced back to the colonial mistakes that were made. These were deliberate blunders, deliberate policies to divide the community, to divide Hindus and Muslims so that they could control the region politically, right? So what they did was, they would deliberately favor one community against the other. This is a policy they started in late 1800s, especially after 1857. After the first war of Indian independence, the British were very eager to break the freedom movement which was starting and to ensure that India remains divided. So after the mutiny, after the 1857 mutiny, the British started implementing several policies to divide different communities on religious lines, linguistic lines, caste lines, etc. They've done this in other countries as well. Even if you go to Sri Lanka, for example, the divide between the communities there, between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, is again a British creation. In Africa as well, they've done the same. In West Asia, they've done the same. They've controlled these regions by dividing the communities, by by exaggerating the existing social divides. And the same thing was done here in Bengal and later across India as well by promoting one community against the other. So the Muslims here didn't prosper as much as the Hindus, and this was a deliberate policy as well, especially in administrative positions. At the level of the provincial and the local administration, the British would deliberately prefer giving positions, very powerful positions, to Hindus. There was a deliberate policy of discrimination at one point against the Muslim community. All right, and within the Muslim community, they deliberately promoted few elites. Some of the traders, businessmen, they would promote them and create an elite, rich class within the Muslim community, whereas majority of them would be suffering. Amongst the Hindus, they would give them key positions in the administration, allowing them to remain influential. So naturally, over a period of time, when there is such deliberate discrimination between different communities, it is going to increase the tensions further. It's going to lead to more clashes, riots, and lead to large-scale communal polarization. So the British deliberately encouraged these tendencies. They would continue supporting some of the radical groups, extremist groups that existed on both the sides. They would keep backing several radical extremist outfits on both the sides, both the religions. The idea was to weaken the moderate phase of our freedom struggle, promote the extremist strands of both the religions. And the direct outcome of this was the partition of Bengal in 1905. The partition of Bengal is said to be a communal partition. See, the official reason given was that Bengal was too large to administer. This was the official reason. The British said that Bengal province is too large to administer effectively, so we are dividing Bengal into West and East Bengal. But the true intent was to divide the communities, divide Hindus and Muslims, divide Bengal on religious lines, and to further widen the resentment. The western part of Bengal was always Hindu dominated, the eastern part of Bengal was always Muslim dominated. So this notorious partition, which was done in 1905 under Lord Curzon, was a communal partition. This further widened the communal divide here, and many historians, they argue that the eventual partition of India, the idea of dividing India on religious lines, was born here. This is the start of the idea. The seed was planted here by the British. This is where the British encouraged the idea of dividing territory on the lines of religion. India's freedom movement was never in favor of this. The moderate phase of our freedom struggle was never in favor of this. India's freedom movement was largely a united, a secular movement, bringing all communities, all sections together. But the seed of dividing the territory on religious lines was sown in 1905. From here onwards, the British would further step up their communal polarization. They would back groups like the Muslim League, which were outright demanding for a separate country for Muslims. They would back leaders like Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, right? Their extremist demands would be supported by the British. Similarly, they would promote radical Hindutva elements as well on the other side. They would back Hindu Mahasabha and other extremist organizations trying to push India towards becoming a Hindu state. These radical tendencies were encouraged by the British, and it all began here with the partition of Bengal. It laid the foundation for the eventual communal partition of India. So throughout this period, from 1905 to 1947, through these 40 years, we saw large-scale communal divisions between Hindus and Muslims because the British were backing these extremist outfits on both the sides. Their agenda was very simple: promote the extremists, divide the society within, and thereby weaken and defeat the moderates who are fighting for independence. Target the freedom struggle, break it down by promoting extremism on both the sides. This led to large-scale communal riots. Throughout these 4 decades, there is a brutal history of communal violence, especially towards Bengal, towards northern, northwestern parts of India. You would have read about Direct Action Day riots, which took place in 1945-46, when the Bengal elections were held, right? In modern history, you will read more about the role of Muslim League, the role of Hindu Mahasabha and other organizations. So the eventual partition, which happened in 1947, led to large-scale divisions, led to large-scale communal violence between Hindus, Muslims, and even the Sikhs. Towards Punjab, right, there was large-scale communal violence involving 3 religions: Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. Same would happen with Bengal as well, large-scale communal violence between Hindus and Muslims. So this communal polarization can be felt even today. Even today, it has an impact in both India, Bangladesh, and of course in Pakistan as well. The root of today's problems, the root of today's conflicts, you can trace all of them back to the very idea of Pakistan, the way in which Pakistan was created. The idea of India is very different. The idea of Pakistan has been very different. It's very, very important to understand these core concepts, so it becomes easy for you to grasp today's Bangladesh, today's Pakistan, etc. So by the time India became independent, that is by 1947, the region was already broken. It was already divided on communal lines. The communal tensions were very high. So eventually, when India, Pakistan were created, as I told you, it was Punjab and Bengal which were partitioned, right? So these areas that were partitioned became part of the state of Pakistan, and thus West Pakistan and East Pakistan were born. All right. Now please understand that the very creation of Pakistan was a communal division, a British idea that was actively encouraged, backed completely by the British, by supporting the Muslim League, by supporting Jinnah and the others. Similarly, the British wanted to push India to become a Hindu state as well. Fortunately for us, we didn't take the path. India's freedom movement was by and large secular. It was free from divisions. India ended up becoming an open, democratic, secular state. That is the prime reason why India thrives. India is progressing today. Look at Pakistan. It's the exact opposite of India. It became a theological state. It adopted official state religion, right? It started persecuting minorities from the very beginning. So if India had taken the same path, if India had fallen into the hands of extremists, and if India had become a theological state, a potential Hindu state like the British were pushing for, even we would have seen the downfall of the country, where minorities are targeted, where different communities are persecuted. This is the fate of any country which adopts official religion and becomes a radical state. This is a fundamental difference between India and Pakistan. The very idea of India and Pakistan are fundamentally different. India comes from a very liberal, moderate philosophy. The very root of this origin, the freedom struggle, right, was led by the moderates. But if you look at the origin of Pakistan, the idea of Pakistan, it comes from extremist radical ideas. It is rooted in the idea of furthering the divides of the society by creating conservative, closed societies. So when Pakistan was created, Pakistan had a lot of internal problems right from the very beginning. It became a theological state, right? It adopted official state religion. It adopted a very rigid version of Sunni Islam as its official religion. Now see, please understand, this has nothing to do with religion. Because see, radicalism, extremism is not limited to any particular religion. It can be found in every faith, in every religion. Be it Christianity, be it Hinduism, be it Islam, be it Sikhism, be it Buddhism. Right? In all the religions, you find a strand of extremism. The problem does not lie with any religion. The problem lies with these vested interests, these elements, who misuse their own religion for their agenda, for their political agenda. Buddhism is a religion of peace, right? The very foundation, the core principle of Buddhism is ahimsa. But even in Buddhism, you have radical extremism. Look at Sri Lanka, look at Myanmar, look at what the radical Buddhists have done. They have committed genocides against the Rohingya Muslims, against the Tamil minorities. Even in Judaism, for example, there are ultra-Orthodox Jews, right? They have very conservative beliefs, they promote radical ideologies, they target the Palestinian Muslims. Look at Sikhism, look at the Khalistan movement. There is a clear religious angle to it. Look at Christianity as well. There is a stand of extremism in Christianity, which believes in very orthodox conservative ideas. White supremacy, Nazi ideologies are closely linked today with right-wing extremism in Christianity as well. The same with Islam, right? The concept of jihad, the concept of Wahhabism and Salafism. These are radical, misinterpreted versions of Islam, right? So in every religion, you find the strand of extremism which has been promoted by the extremist elements. They do this for their political interests. You have radical Hindutva, you have radical Christianity as well. There is radicalism in Sikhism, in Buddhism as well, and in Islam as well. So these vested interests, they have misinterpreted religion, given a different twist, taken religious teachings out of context. So Pakistan adopted a rigid version of religion, a rigid version of Sunni Islam, that is Wahhabism and Salafism, which is more closely linked with West Asian version of Islam. If you look at the autocratic states that you have today, like Saudi Arabia and all the other Gulf countries, right? Most countries, they promote a very conservative ideology of Sunni Islam, that is Wahhabism and Salafism. This is not the true essence of Islam, right? This is the root of extremism and radicalism seen in these countries. This is more an outcome of politics and geopolitics. The problem does not lie with religion itself, all right? Later, we will study Pakistan. We will touch many sensitive topics. We will come to Afghanistan as well. There, I'll explain more on this. You will see how Pakistan has destroyed itself by embracing radical ideology. From the very beginning, from the very start, Pakistan embraced radicalism and minorities were never given a chance in Pakistan. That is the point I was trying to make. As Pakistan embraced a rigid version of religion, made it official state religion, and started breeding radicalism, it started discriminating and targeting the minorities. In West Pakistan, the minorities were driven out, be it Hindus, Sikhs, right, Buddhists, Christians, they were all targeted. Even today, they all face discrimination and targeted violence. It's not just other religions. Even Muslims who don't abide by the strict, rigid version of religion they promote, right? Even they will be targeted. For example, Shias, all right? Shias, Hazaras, Ahmadiyas, even Sunni Muslims who don't follow the rigid version which is being promoted, even they will be targeted, they will be discriminated. So no one is spared if someone does not abide by this rigid version of religious ideology, right? Even Muslims will be targeted, including Shias, Hazaras, Ahmadiyas, and even Sunni Muslims. So that is the extent of radicalism and religious extremism that Pakistan has been promoting. This is not a new phenomenon. It's been happening from decades. The very root of Pakistan's ideology goes back to this. So as West Pakistan was embracing majoritarianism, it was embracing radicalism, a major concern came up in East Pakistan for the Bengali community. When I say Bengali community, it includes both Bengali Hindus and Bengali Muslims. Remember, I told you the Bengali identity is a much stronger identity, a much larger identity than even religious identity. So in East Pakistan, of course, the Bengali community was dominant, both Bengali Hindus and Muslims. After independence, they were obviously looking for equal rights. They were looking for development, progress. But in the state of Pakistan, West Pakistan started dominating the country, and especially Punjab, the Punjab province, the Punjabi elite. They became the most dominant, influential class in Pakistan. The Punjabi Muslims, they became the dominant class. Even today, if you look at Pakistan, if you look at Pakistan's politics, if you look at all the political parties, the leaders, if you look at the Pakistani army, the ISI, all the top leaders, the top officials, they come from the Punjab region. Amongst all the provinces that are present in Pakistan, the most dominant, the most influential province is the Punjab province. Is that clear? In fact, even most of the terror group, the terror leaders also come from Punjab. So the Punjabi elite from West Pakistan, they immediately started dominating the state of Pakistan, the politics of Pakistan. They never gave respect or equal treatment to the Bengali minorities on the other side, that is in East Pakistan. This was a major division that came up in Pakistan from 1947 to 1971. A major division came up where the West Pakistani elite, they would discriminate, oppress, and even target the East Pakistan Bengalis. Understood? That is why you need to understand. That's why you need to understand the core ideology based on which Pakistan was created. It helps you understand the fundamental difference between India and Pakistan. Why Pakistan behaves the way it does. Why Pakistan has been inclined towards radicalism, extremism from the very beginning. It's because these elements, for example, the Muslim League, leaders like Jinnah, and the subsequent leaders, government parties that came up, they've always believed in misusing religion, in misusing religious ideology to promote radicalism, to promote the discrimination of the minorities. So within the country, East Pakistan was discriminated from the very beginning, from the very start. The West Pakistan elite who were dominant, who were influential, they were influential in the government, in the army. So a systematic discrimination was carried out against the Bengalis of East Pakistan. It was not just Bengali Hindus, even Bengali Muslims would be targeted. They wouldn't be given equal treatment. Various laws, policies would be brought out, and in these laws and policies, there would be a discrimination against the Bengalis. Politically, economically, it was West Pakistan which was thriving, whereas East Pakistan was largely neglected. It was largely kept under control by using the army to use force to keep the region under check. So obviously, the Bengalis could not take this oppression. They sensed the discrimination from the very beginning. Immediately after independence, they could feel that they were being left out, they were being discriminated. For the Bengalis, there was no true independence for them. There was no difference between the British rule and the Pakistan rule and the West Pakistani rule. As West Pakistan dominated, as the Punjabi elite dominated Pakistan, the Bengalis were left behind in East Pakistan. So a major divide came up. This was more of an ethnic divide between West and East Pakistan, between the Punjabi elites and the Bengali minorities here in East Pakistan. So during these 20 odd years, the oppression and discrimination gave rise to resentment. Obviously, the Bengalis, they started resenting this, they started opposing it, and slowly they started organizing into a political rebellion. They started demanding for their rights. They started representing themselves, calling for equal treatment and equal rights. So in 1960s, a party emerged that represented the Bengalis called the Awami League. led by a very popular leader called Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. By late 1960s, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman would emerge as the leader of the Bengali community, and his party, the Awami League, would become very popular in East Pakistan. This was an organized political movement, a movement demanding equal treatment, equal rights for East Pakistan, for the Bengalis, and calling for an end to the discrimination from the Punjabi elite from West Pakistan. By this time, the divisions had increased. By late 1960s, the divisions had increased in the Pakistani society. This became Pakistan's biggest internal divide, biggest internal problem. And no one created this. Pakistan itself created this for itself. It was the policies of the Pakistani state, its promotion of radicalism, promotion of conservative ideology, and the domination of the government and the army by the Punjabi elite. That is what led to this crisis. These divisions eventually led to an organized political movement led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman representing the Bengali community. In 1970, elections were held in Pakistan, and the Awami League won the elections, and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was supposed to become the leader. This shocked Pakistan. West Pakistan was shaken when Awami League won the elections led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He was supposed to head the government. Is that clear? That was the popularity of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman at one point of time. So West Pakistan never wanted to give up control. West Pakistan was never comfortable in losing control in East Pakistan. So what Pakistan did was, it tried to nullify the election results. It even arrested Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested. He was prevented from taking his position. And by this time, as tensions were increasing, the Pakistani army had been deployed extensively in East Pakistan. As tensions were growing, political, social tensions had gone up, the Pakistani army had been given a role to stabilize East Pakistan. So politically, the Punjabi elite, they tried to nullify the election results. They didn't recognize the victory of Awami League. They even got Sheikh Mujibur Rahman arrested for a brief period. Essentially, democracy had been destroyed in Pakistan. In fact, much before this, right, the nexus between the military, the intelligence agencies, the political parties had already destroyed any sense of democracy in Pakistan. It was always the Punjabi elite, the leaders of the army and the ISI, and few politicians who were in control. So this hunger for power, this blind faith in conservative radicalism is what led to the downfall of Pakistan itself. Tensions were going up in East Pakistan. The Bengalis were rebelling. Now, this was turning into violent protests as well. As their leader had been arrested and prevented from assuming his office, violence was breaking out. The Bengalis were not taking it lying down. The political movement was turning towards violent protest by this point of time. It was turning into a revolution. By this point, a call was given to liberate East Pakistan as well, to liberate the region and to form a separate country for the Bengalis called Bangladesh. As this discrimination, oppression continued and the targeted violence continued, right? The root for, the base for a revolutionary movement, a liberation movement was also laid by 1970. There were a few groups which came up, which were calling for independence from Pakistan, to break the country away, to break East Pakistan away, to protect the Bengalis, protect their rights, and ensure that the region gets the respect it deserves. This was the setting. This was the context in which the 1971 war was fought between India and Pakistan. This is the origin story of Bangladesh. It defines India-Bangladesh relations today. Was fought between India and Pakistan. This is the origin. This was the setting. This was the context in which the 1971 war was fought between India and Pakistan. This is the origin story of Bangladesh. It defines India-Bangladesh relations today. For this entire period, Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan. So you need to know what really happened inside Pakistan. What set off the conflict? What set off the crisis that happened after this? What role did India play in this entire crisis? This is something we need to understand in great detail. So now you know what was the situation by 1970. Is that clear? This is something we need to understand in great detail. So now you know what was the situation by 1970. Is that clear? There was an organized political rebellion, right? Bengalis had a leader they could identify with. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Awami League was representing the Bengali community, giving leadership. It had won elections as well, but West Pakistan was preventing Mujibur Rahman from occupying his office. He had been arrested as well. So violent protests were breaking out. A call was given for revolution, and liberation movements were taking root. Bengali liberation movements were getting established. This was the volatile situation in East Pakistan by 1970. And progressively, from 1968, 69, 70, during this period, there were reports of targeted violence as well. As the Bengali resistance started growing from late 1960s, there were reports coming from East Pakistan that the army and the ISI were targeting the Bengali community. There was targeted violence against certain leaders. It was believed that Pakistani army and the ISI, the intelligence agency, they were targeting the Bengali community, the Bengali leaders especially. So to some extent, a targeted violent campaign had started, which was sponsored by the state, sponsored by the government to target one specific community. And the army and the ISI were doing this to curb any unrest. They were targeting few Bengali leaders, students, intellectuals who were leading the movement. They were being reportedly targeted. From 68, 69 itself, targeted killings were happening. All right, many were getting kidnapped. Torture was becoming common. And it was the Bengali leaders who were part of the movement who were facing the complete wrath of the Pakistani state. But until now, it was still a small internal crisis in Pakistan. It was still not an epic crisis. It was still a crisis or internal division within Pakistan. But after this, after 1970, after the violent protests broke out and after a popular revolution was taking root, then Pakistan did something atrocious. In 1971, as Pakistan felt more concerned, worried about the stability of the state, it did something very, very disastrous. On the 24th of March, 1971, the Pakistani army launched a deadly operation in East Pakistan called Operation Searchlight. As the Bengali resistance was growing, the Bengali resistance was growing day by day, and as Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was becoming popular, West Pakistan decided to curb and end this movement forever, and it launched a notorious deadly military operation called Operation Searchlight. This day is a very, very important day in the history of South Asia, 24th March 1971. It was on this night, on the night of 24th March, the Pakistani army launched this operation targeting the Bengali leaders, targeting the Bengali resistance movement. and this began a genocide against the Bengalis. It was nothing short of a genocide that Pakistan committed in East Pakistan. With the launch of Operation Searchlight, Bengali leaders were targeted. Large-scale violence broke out, and even innocents, civilians were being targeted, and entire communities were being destroyed in East Pakistan. Within hours, within days, thousands and thousands of Bengalis were killed, and over the next few months, at least a few lakh Bengalis, at least more than 1 million Bengalis were being killed and slaughtered by the Pakistani army. That's why India has always said that this was a genocide that was committed. Genocide is a targeted violence against a community, which is often sponsored by a state, by a government. If the government itself is sponsoring targeted violence against a community, and if large-scale killings are happening, if lakhs of people, millions of people are being killed, then that is a genocide. For example, what happened with the Jews in Europe under Nazi Germany. Jews in Europe. So that was a genocide, where the government is usually backing the targeted elimination of an entire community. Right? That when this happens on a large scale, when lakhs and millions are being killed, that is called a genocide. So in 1971, Pakistan committed a genocide in East Pakistan, slaughtering lakhs and lakhs of Bengalis. This obviously triggered a massive humanitarian crisis. It created the biggest humanitarian crisis the region had ever seen. And obviously, Bengalis who were affected, they started running away, they started fleeing East Pakistan and turned into refugees. And their only hope was India. In fact, from 1968 itself, there was a small flow of refugees into India. Because some Bengalis who didn't see any future in East Pakistan, who knew that they are going to be restricted, targeted by West Pakistan, they started leaving East Pakistan. Because you don't forget, the partition had divided many families. There were families on both sides connected with each other. So obviously, if people from East Pakistan came to India, they would always get support. They would always have a moral, cultural support on the other side. So from 1968 itself, we were receiving a small flow of refugees into India, specifically into West Bengal and even into parts of Assam. This kept on increasing slightly day by day. By 1969, 1970, the flow of refugees kept on increasing as the targeting and the violence, the operation increased in East Pakistan. But after Operation Searchlight, after this mass targeted violence began, it triggered a massive refugee crisis, something we had never ever dealt with, something we had never ever imagined. 10 million refugees at least came into India. They entered West Bengal, Tripura, and Assam. These border states, they took the full brunt of what was happening in our neighboring country. The targeted violence, the genocide the Pakistani army was committing against the Bengalis triggered this huge humanitarian crisis, and India had to bear the burden. Is that clear? It was not just the leaders of the movement who were being targeted. All right, even innocent students who were protesting, who were boycotting colleges, lawyers and intellectuals who were supporting the liberation movement, they all would be targeted. They would be assassinated. Entire Bengali neighborhoods were targeted. Even women and children were not spared. So that is why it was nothing short of a humanitarian disaster. It was a genocide that Pakistan committed. So obviously, it triggered a massive refugee crisis. Almost 10 million plus refugees entered India, and overnight, this was becoming a nightmare for India. It was becoming the worst crisis that we had ever imagined. Now, it's not that India was completely unaware until this point. All right, India was actually very deeply involved in what was happening much before this. From 1960s itself, India was closely watching the divisions that were opening in Pakistan. We knew the situation of the Bengalis. India knew very well the divide that existed between West and East Pakistan. Is that clear? India was very well aware of the circumstances, especially by late 1960s. By 1968, 69, and by 1970, we had started closely monitoring the crisis that was brewing in East Pakistan. Is that clear? India had started closely monitoring the developments that were happening inside Pakistan. At that point, India was led by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. It was the Indira Gandhi government which was in power. So India was keeping a close watch on what was happening in Pakistan. It was an obvious requirement for India, given the history that we have with Pakistan. So Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had, by this time, authorized India's Foreign Intelligence Agency, RAW, or Research and Analysis Wing, to keep a close watch on what was happening in Pakistan. All right, RAW was established in 1968. It was a newly created intelligence agency. It was specifically set up to deal with foreign intelligence, to deal with external intelligence. Until 1968, we only had one intelligence agency. That was IB, or Intelligence Bureau. From 1947 to 1968, the IB was looking after both domestic intelligence and foreign intelligence. But the 62 war and the 65 war with China and Pakistan had exposed the weakness of Intelligence Bureau. The Indira Gandhi government, which came in, realized that one agency cannot handle both domestic and foreign intelligence, because both are different specializations. Domestic intelligence is a very different ballgame, whereas foreign intelligence is a different ballgame altogether. So in 1968, a new intelligence agency was created called Research and Analysis Wing under the leadership of R.N. Kao, a legendary police and intelligence officer. He comes from the Indian Civil Services, the ICS, from the British era colonial police, and one of the top Indian spy masters at that point of time, very close to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So under his leadership, a new foreign intelligence agency was created called RAW, which would exclusively focus on India's foreign intelligence operations. IB was assigned only for domestic intelligence from here on. From 1968, Intelligence Bureau would focus only on domestic intelligence within India. For all foreign operations, RAW was set up under R.N. Kao. So from the very beginning, RAW would keep a close watch on what was happening in West and East Pakistan. We were tracking the developments, watching the liberation movement which was taking root, keeping a close watch on the liberation movement and the political struggle that had begun. All right, this was of great interest for India. Until then, India remained largely silent. We were just observing, watching what was happening. We would express concern about the Bengalis, but we wouldn't go beyond that, right? But once the refugee crisis began, once it started becoming a burden for India, India was forced to act. We could no longer just sit and observe, right? So there were several motivations for India to get involved in what was happening in East Pakistan. One was, of course, the burden of refugees. The neighboring states were struggling. Because see, please understand, India at that point was still a poor country with a lot of developmental challenges. Our economy was still struggling. We still had massive poverty, right? We were struggling for food security at that point. So we ourselves had many problems to deal with, many economic and social problems. Along with this, India was being burdened with a huge refugee crisis, and we had to accommodate the refugees. It was a moral duty of India, a moral obligation. Because Bengalis are very closely connected with India. Is that clear? And moreover, protecting human rights is an obligation, it's a duty. That too, when a community is facing such targeted violence on such a scale, it became India's duty to protect them. It was a obligation that India had. Because the Bengalis have civilizational links with India, right? They have families on the other side of the border, families in West Bengal, Tripura, Assam. They had relatives on the other side in East Pakistan. So we could no longer ignore the issue. We couldn't simply stay out of it. There was a moral obligation on India to protect the Bengalis. They were looking up to India for help. They were completely helpless, right? They were running away from this atrocity to save their lives, and India was their only hope. At the same time, while India was ready to fulfill the moral duty and the obligation, we couldn't deal with the burden as well, right? This was beyond India's capacity at that point. Dealing with this permanent refugee crisis, accommodating more than 1 million refugees, was something that India was not prepared for. So this was one prime motivation for India to get involved in this conflict and to do something about it. One was a moral duty to protect the Bengalis, and second was the burden that Pakistan was creating for India. All right, this was one of the motivations, the moral responsibility and the burden that we were facing. But the primary motivation for Indira Gandhi government was the strategic opportunity that was opening up for India. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Because see, from 1947, Pakistan had always been problematic for India, right? From the very beginning, it triggered the Kashmir dispute, right? It had already fought 2 wars with India in 1947 and 1965. It had occupied Indian territory in Jammu and Kashmir. It had even given away a part of Indian territory to China. It had leased a part of Indian territory in Gilgit-Baltistan to China. It had formed a nexus with China. And via East Pakistan, it was already supporting insurgency in Northeast India in 1960s. In 1960s, the Mizo insurgency had started. Naga insurgency had already started by 1950s. These insurgents were being supported in East Pakistan by the Pakistani agencies. All right, Naga and Mizo insurgent groups were getting direct support in East Pakistan. So Pakistan was already involved in a secret war, a covert war against India, trying to destabilize India in Jammu and Kashmir and in Northeast region. So considering the threat Pakistan posed to India, and especially the headache, the nightmare of dealing with 2 Pakistans on 2 fronts, right? This was a golden opportunity, a strategic opportunity for India to exploit the internal divide of Pakistan. All right? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that was opening up for India, and the Indira Gandhi government capitalized on this. Understood? So there were complex motivations that were driving India's decision making. All right? Now that is how complex international relations is. On one hand, we were selfless actually. We actually wanted to protect the Bengalis, genuinely wanted to help them because it's a moral duty. Bengalis are connected to India. We have an obligation, responsibility to protect them, and moreover, it's a question of human rights. We had already accommodated Tibetan refugees. We had accommodated Tamil refugees by this point of time. It was only a continuation of this policy to protect the Bengali refugees as well. But along with this selfless act, we were motivated by a strategic concern that Pakistan is always going to be a problem. We cannot deal with 2 Pakistans on 2 fronts. And this was the opportunity that India was waiting for. So Prime Minister Indira Gandhi authorized RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, to launch one of India's biggest covert wars deep inside Pakistan. All right? This was much before the 1971 war. See, many of you would have heard about the 1971 war between India and Pakistan. All right? This war was fought only in December 1971. Understood? This was the overt phase of the war. This is the publicly acknowledged phase of the war. This is what we officially speak about. This is what we officially acknowledge. But much before this, in fact, a couple of years before this, India had already launched a secret war inside Pakistan. A covert war had already been launched by India via the Research and Analysis Wing. First, we were monitoring the developments, observing the developments, building contacts, and we immediately started supporting the liberation movement and the rebellion which was taking root. Understood? India would get very close to Awami League from late 1960s itself. India would build contacts with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. India was very, very close to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And after the crisis began, after refugees started flowing into India, we even supported the Mukti Bahini, which was an armed revolutionary movement. All right? So we gave support to not just the political movement that was taking root, but we gave direct support to the armed rebellion that was taking root in East Pakistan. Our objective was very clear, very simple. Support the rebellion, support the liberation movement in every possible way, and play a direct role in weakening Pakistan and in breaking Pakistan into 2. All right? At this point, the international community was doing nothing. The UN, as always, was ineffective. It was not even paying attention to the crisis. The Western countries turned a blind eye. The US, in particular, ignored what was happening because US had become a very, very close ally and friend of Pakistan. US knew what was happening. West European countries like UK and others, they knew what was happening. Their own diplomats were writing back to their governments, highlighting the atrocities, the genocide that was going on. Western diplomats were comparing this to the Holocaust that the Jews had suffered during the World War period. Despite this, the Western governments wouldn't act. They wouldn't put any pressure on Pakistan, as Pakistan had become very close to US and the Western countries. Because don't forget, this was the Cold War period, where there was intense rivalry and competition between different powers. Countries would go to any extent to protect their influence, their interests. And Pakistan was serving Western interests. It was helping the United States. I'll explain more on that a little later. So as Pakistan was critical for the Western countries, they did not act against Pakistan. They completely ignored. India started providing evidence. We started appealing to the global audience, to the global community, highlighting what Pakistan was doing. But we didn't get any international support. All right, so India had to do this on its own. No one would come to India's help. No one else would help the Bengalis. So India took the matters into its own hands, and we launched a secret war, a covert war in Pakistan, which was clearly designed with the intention to break Pakistan into 2 parts, to exploit this internal division and probably liberate East Pakistan forever. All right, so we not only extended support to the political movement, but we gave complete support to the armed rebellion. Is that clear? The Research and Analysis Wing, through a special force called SFF, the Special Frontier Force, would start focusing on the refugees. We would recruit the refugees into the Mukti Bahini and provide them all the required support, including training, military level training, weapons and funds. Everything would be provided by India. RAW would provide the funds, the weapons that were needed, and SFF commandos would train the Mukti Bahini rebels who would be pushed back into East Pakistan to resist the Pakistani atrocities. All right, especially after Operation Searchlight, there was a wave of refugees, and the victims of this violence, they were ready to fight back. They had lost their families. They wanted revenge against Pakistan. They had the motivation to fight. So India would recruit them into this paramilitary force called Mukti Bahini, which was raised by India. So all along the borders, training camps were set up by SFF. SFF is a special operation branch of RAW, the Special Frontier Force. It's one of India's most secretive elite forces. All right, it's a armed branch of RAW, the Special Operations Branch of RAW, and it has seen extensive operations in the Himalayan belt, in Jammu and Kashmir, etc. So SFF was deployed, and it has been engaged by India. So all along the borders, training camps were set up by SFF. SFF is a special operation branch of RAW, the Special Frontier Force. It's one of India's most secretive elite forces. All right, it's a armed branch of RAW, the Special Operations Branch of RAW, and it has seen extensive operations in the Himalayan belt, in Jammu and Kashmir, etc. So SFF was deployed here along the border areas to recruit the refugees, to motivate them, to train them, give them the weapons, provide them the funds, and use them to fight against the Pakistani army. This was the covert phase of the war, which remains unacknowledged even today. Obviously, it can never be acknowledged. It's a classified operation, a very intensive operation that went on for several months. This was not just an intelligence gathering mission. This was a direct involvement in what was happening with direct armed support to a rebellion group. Right? India played a direct role in supplying weapons and training the Mukti Bahini and using Mukti Bahini to target the Pakistani army. So much before the overt war began, India had already weakened Pakistan through this secret war. All right, this was seen as a strategic decision by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to use India's intelligence agency to meddle and interfere in Pakistan's internal issues, to widen the divide, back the rebels, and give them all the support necessary to weaken Pakistan internally. All right, so this escalated the violence, and throughout 1971, there was large-scale violence happening in East Pakistan. On one hand, Pakistani army was targeting the Bengalis, and now on the other hand, the Bengali liberation fighters were fighting back. They were targeting the Pakistani army as well. So obviously, Pakistan would figure out that India was playing a role. Pakistan would get to know what India was doing, and it became quite certain that Pakistan is likely to attack India. To cut off the Indian support and to retaliate, it was quite evident that Pakistan might launch a war. It might risk going to war with India in order to protect East Pakistan. So throughout 1971, India was preparing for an eventual conflict. While the secret war was going on, while the covert war was going on inside East Pakistan, we were parallelly preparing for a overt war as well. The Indira Gandhi government had put the armed forces on high alert, the Army, Navy, and the Indian Air Force. By 1971, India knew what was coming. It was very much anticipated that a war is likely to break out. Pakistan is going to retaliate, and India held back. India did not launch the first attack because it was very important to maintain the global image. We were not getting much of global support. Western countries especially were not backing India, they were backing Pakistan. They were ignoring what was happening. So if India had launched the attack, if India had gone to war, we would be branded as the aggressors. India would have been branded as the problem, as we triggered the conflict. So the Indira Gandhi government held back. We didn't want to initiate the overt war, and we just kept the covert war going on. All right? So we waited for Pakistan to commit the first act of aggression. By that time, the Indian forces were preparing for the eventual conflict, preparing for a full-fledged war, possible full-fledged war, both with West and East Pakistan. And that is exactly what happened in December 1971. As Pakistan came under tremendous pressure because of the liberation struggle, as Mukti Bahini and Awami League were fighting back, as Bengali liberation fighters were fighting back, it became a threat to Pakistan's sovereignty. Pakistan was on the brink of collapse. It was very evident that East Pakistan was breaking away and Pakistan would lose sovereignty over East Pakistan. So at this point, Pakistan was forced to retaliate against India, and as expected, it launched a war against India. Is that clear? In the first week of December, on the 2nd of December, Pakistan would open the first attack against India, and surprisingly, it was on the Western Front. Pakistani Air Force would bomb Indian positions and Indian Air Force bases in western part of India. So this began the conflict of 1971, and immediately India declared war against Pakistan. As Pakistan committed this act of aggression, it was nothing short of an act of war. Right? Pakistan had intruded into Indian airspace, bombed Indian territory, and India was prepared for this conflict. So immediately India declared a full-fledged war against Pakistan involving all the three armed forces. This was one of the first and only instance where all the three forces were proactively involved in a conflict. It was a tri-service conflict. The Army, Navy, Air Force, all the three played a critical role in the overt phase of the war. India was so well prepared, and we had the conventional edge that within 2 weeks, by 16th December, India had broken Pakistan and we had liberated Bangladesh. It was a very quick and a swift war with a decisive result. See, usually wars are not decisive. Usually in a war, you see a stalemate, like for example, the Russia-Ukraine war. Wars usually drag for a long time. There are no clear winners or losers. But 1971 was a different story altogether. This is seen as India's finest diplomatic, military, and intelligence moment. It was a diplomatic, military, and intelligence victory. It took the combined effort of various organs of the Indian state to achieve this stellar victory against Pakistan. The Indian armed forces played a pivotal role. They were thoroughly prepared for the conflict. They delivered a crushing defeat to Pakistan. All the three branches of the Pakistani forces were wiped out by India. The intelligence agencies did a phenomenal job, starting with RAW. In fact, RAW was the first agency to get involved in this conflict, much before the overt war began. And even the diplomatic efforts of India was tremendous at this point of time. We appealed to many countries, gave evidence to show what Pakistan was doing, to highlight that it was committing a genocide, slaughtering Bengalis on a large scale. So we won global support at a crucial point of time, and it was a diplomatic victory as well for India. We delivered a crushing defeat, and eventually Bangladesh was liberated, and India had broken Pakistan into two parts. India had played a direct role. We not only fought this overt war, but we had already fought a covert war to weaken Pakistan. All right. So when the war began, it was quite easier for the Indian army to carry out deep invasions into Pakistani territory. On both the fronts, both western and eastern fronts, the Indian army made rapid advances. We made incursions into Pakistani territory, in West Pakistan as well, and Indian army almost fully occupied East Pakistan. We ran through the territory. We got the support from Mukti Bahini as well, which was already fighting inside East Pakistan. RAW already had significant influence and contacts, and together, India quickly annexed, at least for a short period, we invaded East Pakistan and took complete control of East Pakistan. All right. Similarly, the Indian Air Force played a critical role in destroying the Pakistani Air Force, right, both on the western and eastern front. It defended India's airspace quite effectively as well. And the Indian Navy played a critical role as well. This was one of the first major naval operations of India, all right, especially on the 4th of December. On the 4th of December, India delivered a crushing blow to Pakistan by destroying the Karachi harbor. This day is a landmark day for Indian armed forces. Even today, it is marked as the Navy Day. 4th of December is celebrated as a Navy Day because on this day, the Indian Navy destroyed Karachi port and the Karachi naval base. Karachi was vital for the Pakistani Navy. Indian Navy destroyed multiple Pakistani naval ships and submarines. We sunk many Pakistani ships and submarines and destroyed the oil depots at Karachi Harbour. Karachi was literally set on fire, right? It was a crushing defeat for the Pakistani Navy. We even successfully blockaded reinforcements. Since West Pakistan had to send reinforcements to East Pakistan across the Indian Ocean, across the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, India imposed a blockade, a naval blockade, blocking any movement of Pakistani vessels and submarines. All right, so it included a major naval component. Multiple Pakistani vessels were sunk by India. Pakistani submarines were also hit, and India dominated the waters as well. India had an aircraft carrier at that point of time, right? And using its predominant position, conventional superiority, we brought down the Pakistani Navy. So this was an outright victory for India on all the fronts. The Indian Special Forces were also involved in this conflict. The Para-SF, the Para-Commandos of the Indian Army, the Marcos or the Marine Commandos of the Navy also played a role. They carried out a series of covert operations in enemy territory to weaken the Pakistani forces, to sabotage Pakistani positions. So by the end of it, it was a decisive victory for India, clear-cut victory, where Pakistan was conclusively defeated by India. All right. So with this, India had liberated Bangladesh. We had played a direct role in the liberation of Bangladesh. Now, this is what you need to understand about India's direct contribution in liberating Bangladesh in 1971. Understood? It was a decisive victory because Pakistan was made to surrender. Pakistan was forced to accept defeat and sign the instrument of surrender. Now, this was something that was unique about this war. Many of you would have seen this image. It's a historic image, a popular image, where the Pakistani general, the commanding officer of East Pakistan, is signing the instrument of surrender in front of the Indian army officials. Usually, countries don't surrender officially. Officially, they don't write in, they give it in writing that we are surrendering. But in this context, Pakistan had to surrender because it had no other choice. India had fully invaded and occupied East Pakistan. We had made deep incursions into West Pakistan as well. By the end of the war, India held 95,000 POWs. POW stands for prisoners of war. 95,000 Pakistani soldiers were captured by India. They were in Indian custody for several months. Now, this was a huge leverage we had. All right, 95,000 Pakistani soldiers were caught as POWs, as prisoners of war. Pakistan officially surrendered, signed the instrument of surrender, accepting defeat, and thus marking the conclusive victory of India. All right, with this, we liberated Bangladesh, and it was formalized. The liberation of Bangladesh was formalized, and the war was officially brought to an end by signing the Shimla Agreement. The Shimla Agreement was signed in 1972, which officially brought this war to an end. All right. Now, the Shimla Agreement in itself is very, very important for our exams. It's very relevant for India-Pakistan relations even today. So you should know what is the Shimla Agreement all about, what are the key provisions it contained, and what marked the end of this war, what happened after this. So through the Shimla Agreement, Pakistan was forced to make a lot of concessions. It had no other option. India held the complete edge, the advantage. We occupied Pakistani territory, right? We invaded into West and East Pakistan, and the entire East Pakistan was under Indian control. We held 95,000 Pakistani soldiers. Pakistan had officially surrendered, and it could no longer continue fighting against India. So in every possible way, Pakistan had been defeated. We had the complete leverage on Pakistan, so we could make Pakistan agree on whatever terms we wanted. So to this, we officially ended the war. Officially, the war was brought to an end between India and Pakistan. Pakistan was made to formally recognize Bangladesh as an independent country. Pakistan had to recognize Bangladesh as an independent country. India did not give any choice to Pakistan. So Pakistan had to accept the creation of Bangladesh. So formally, Pakistan finally accepted that Bangladesh is independent. East Pakistan no longer exists. So thus, Pakistan was formally broken into two parts. Next, Pakistan was made to commit to not destabilize India, to not target India going forward. Is that clear? To not fight covert wars against India. This was a commitment, a legal commitment we extracted. Pakistan was supposed to fulfill this, but obviously, as you know, Pakistan has not kept up this promise. After this, Pakistan has waged many covert wars against India. It has repeatedly destabilized India by sponsoring many terrorist organizations. It has backed the Khalistan movement, terrorism in Kashmir and across India, right? So Pakistan has clearly broken this commitment, and that's why even now, even today, India brings up this commitment of Pakistan when we negotiate with Pakistan. That's why the Shimla Agreement is very important, very relevant even today. Whenever India Pakistan meet, whenever we discuss, negotiate something, we remind Pakistan how it failed. We remind Pakistan of this failed commitment. Since we bring up the issue of terrorism that Pakistan is sponsoring, right? We remind Pakistan that it has a legal commitment under Shimla Agreement to not destabilize India, to not sponsor covert wars against India. So that is why this agreement is relevant even today. Recently as well, India's foreign minister and India's representatives at the UN had reminded Pakistan of its commitments under the Shimla Agreement. It keeps coming up even now. That's why it's important. Next, India agreed to return all the POWs with complete dignity by respecting human rights. India has always been very responsible on this front. We don't exploit POWs. We don't violate their human rights and dignity. They were treated with respect. Every soldier deserves to be treated with respect. Every human deserves to be treated with respect. That's exactly what India did. India never violated the rights, the dignity of the POWs. We returned them back as a humanitarian gesture, as a peaceful gesture, in return for Pakistan accepting all these changes. But one of the most important changes we did was the ceasefire line in Kashmir was renamed by India and Pakistan as the line of control. This is how the LOC was established. All right, let me tell you the significance of this change, and after that, we'll take a short break. See, when the first India-Pakistan war happened in 1947, India, which fought back against the Pakistani invasion, we had retaken some of the occupied areas in Kashmir. We pushed back the Pakistani intruders, and then we had taken the matter to the United Nations. We called for a ceasefire. We didn't want the war to drag, the war to continue. So we had taken the matter to the UN, hoping for a fair solution from the UN. Because India placed its faith in the UN. It was a newly created international organization. India was committed to upholding international laws and international order. So we approached the UN expecting a fair solution so that we need not drag this conflict forever. But at the UN, India realized that UN is quite ineffective because within the UN, the P5 countries, the 5 permanent members, were playing their own geopolitics. US, UK, even France to an extent, They were all part of the Western world, driven by their own motivations. Russia and China, communist countries, they had their own motivations. Right? So during the Cold War, these countries had their own motivations, and the UK especially was always in favor of Pakistan against India. UK always had this initial grudge against India, especially after independence, because UK was always having that grudge, that resentment regarding India's freedom struggle. UK was more comfortable in dealing with Pakistan, as Pakistan turned out the way it wanted. Right? Muslim League Jinnah were very close to the British, and they were fulfilling British interests. So Pakistan remained closer to the UK. So when this matter, the Kashmir conflict was taken to the UN, India saw that, especially UK, was favoring Pakistan. UN was not acting in an unbiased manner. So we were not comfortable with the UN involvement. All right, but the UN mediated the Karachi Agreement of 1949. The Karachi Agreement of 1949, through which the ceasefire was formally established between India and Pakistan. Is that clear? The UN recognized the ceasefire line, which was the temporary positions India and Pakistan had in Kashmir. This was formalized through the Karachi Agreement, and the UN gave itself a role to monitor the ceasefire line. For this purpose, a UN military observer group was established in order to monitor the ceasefire line. Is that clear? To monitor and enforce the ceasefire on India and Pakistan, to ensure they don't breach the ceasefire, to maintain the stability, UN appointed a military observer group. A UN military observer group was appointed on both sides of Kashmir, both in India and as well as in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And the role of this military observer group was to monitor the ceasefire. So thereby, UN had given itself a role in the Kashmir as well as in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And the Karachi Agreement of 1940, the UN was favoring Pakistan. UN was not acting in an unbiased manner. So we were not comfortable with the UN involvement. All right, but the UN mediated the Karachi Agreement of 1949. The Karachi Agreement of 1949, through which the ceasefire was formally established between India and Pakistan. Is that clear? The UN recognized the ceasefire line, which was the temporary positions India and Pakistan had in Kashmir. This was formalized through the Karachi Agreement, and the UN gave itself a role to monitor the ceasefire line. For this purpose, a UN military observer group was the Karachi Agreement, and the UN recognized the ceasefire line, through which the ceasefire was formed. The Karachi Agreement of 1949. The Karachi Agreement of 1949, through which the ceasefire was formally established between India and Pakistan. Is that clear? The UN recognized the ceasefire line, which was the temporary positions India and Pakistan had in Kashmir. This was formalized through the Karachi Agreement, and the UN gave itself a role to monitor the ceasefire line. For this purpose, a UN military observer group was established in order to monitor the ceasefire line. Is that clear? To monitor and enforce the ceasefire on India and Pakistan, to ensure they don't breach the ceasefire, to maintain the stability, UN appointed a military observer group. A UN military observer group was appointed on both sides of Kashmir, both in India and as well as in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And the role of this military observer group was to monitor the ceasefire. So thereby, UN had given itself a role in the Kashmir conflict. It had become the third party to the Kashmir conflict. All right, the UN had given itself a role in the Kashmir conflict by monitoring the ceasefire line and by enforcing the Karachi Agreement on India and Pakistan. Now, India was not comfortable with this. Yes, India realized that taking the matter to the UN was a mistake. In retrospect, it was easy to see that it was a mistake. At that point, when India approached the UN, we were expecting a fair solution. We placed our faith in the UN as it was a newly created body, which was meant to resolve such conflicts. It was established for that purpose. The purpose of UN was to resolve conflicts and establish peace and stability. India was a key member of the UN, and then Prime Minister Nehru had placed a lot of faith in the UN. So, but very quickly, India realized that we couldn't trust the UN, especially Western countries such as the UK. UK was in favor of Pakistan, acting in a biased way towards Pakistan, and we weren't comfortable in allowing UN to play a role in the Kashmir conflict. But because of the Karachi Agreement, it had become a commitment on us. It was an international obligation that UN should have a role in monitoring the ceasefire line. This continued until 1971. Then India utilized this opportunity and it carried out a masterstroke, a very genius way of taking the UN out of this conflict. What India did was, we made Pakistan agree. We made Pakistan agree to the Shimla Agreement that the ceasefire line that we had agreed to under Karachi Agreement does not exist anymore. If we both agree to this bilaterally, then there's nothing the UN can do. We erase the ceasefire line and does not exist anymore. The Shimla Agreement that the ceasefire line that we had agreed to under Karachi Agreement does not exist anymore. If we both agree to this bilaterally, then there's nothing the UN can do. We erased the ceasefire line and renamed it as line of control. This was a very clever change of words. It was a technical change, a legal change that we introduced. On the ground, nothing changed. On the ground, since this was a very clever change of the ceasefire line that we had agreed to under Karachi Agreement does not exist anymore. If we both agree to this bilaterally, then there's nothing the UN can do. We erased the ceasefire line and renamed it as line of control. This was a very clever change of words. It was UN can do. We erased the ceasefire. It had become the third party to the Kashmir conflict. All right, the UN had given itself a role in the Kashmir conflict by monitoring the ceasefire line and by enforcing the Karachi Agreement on India and Pakistan. Now, India was not comfortable with this. Yes, India realized that taking the matter to the UN was a mistake. In retrospect, it was easy to see that it was a mistake. At that point, when India approached the UN, we were expecting a fair solution. We placed our faith in the UN as it was a newly created body, which was meant to resolve such conflicts. It was established for that purpose. The purpose of UN was to resolve conflicts and establish peace and stability. India was a key member of the UN, and then Prime Minister Nehru had placed a lot of faith in the UN. So, but very quickly, India realized that we couldn't trust the UN, especially Western countries such as the UK. UK was in favor of Pakistan, acting in a biased way towards Pakistan, and we weren't comfortable in allowing UN to play a role in the Kashmir conflict. But because of the Karachi Agreement, it had become a commitment on us. It was an international obligation that UN should have a role in monitoring the ceasefire line. This continued until 1971. Then India utilized this opportunity and it carried out a masterstroke, a very genius way of taking the UN out of this conflict. What India did was, we made Pakistan agree. We made Pakistan agree to the Shimla Agreement that the ceasefire line that we had agreed to under Karachi Agreement does not exist anymore. If we both agree to this bilaterally, then there's nothing the UN can do. We erased the ceasefire line and renamed it as line of control. This was a very clever change of words. It was a technical change, a legal change that we introduced. On the ground, nothing changed. On the ground, since 1947, India, Pakistan have held the same positions. All right? Whatever positions we held in 1947 is the current position as well. On the ground, it has not changed. But the ceasefire line, this line was called the ceasefire line, the de facto temporary border. We renamed it as LOC or line of control through Shimla Agreement. When you rename it, what happens? There is no ceasefire line anymore. So if there's no ceasefire line, what will the UN monitor? If the ceasefire line itself does not exist, and if Pakistan and India both have agreed to it, there is no role for the military observer group. So cleverly, to making these legal technical changes, we eliminated the third-party role of UN. Since then, we made Pakistan commit that Kashmir conflict is a bilateral issue, and there will be no third-party involvement in the Kashmir conflict. Is that clear? We made it clear that third parties will not be involved. No third party will be involved in this conflict. It's a bilateral issue for India, Pakistan to resolve. We will not encourage any other country or any other global organization to get involved in the Kashmir dispute. This is the stand we maintain even today. Pakistan tries to internationalize the Kashmir issue. It tries to bring in UN or China or another group or another country. But we clearly say that Kashmir is a bilateral dispute. Pakistan has agreed to it under Shimla Agreement. So there's no scope for involving a third party, not even the UN. So we threw UN out of the Kashmir conflict. We ended the third party involvement by neutralizing the ceasefire line. We renamed the ceasefire line as LOC, as line of control. So if there's no ceasefire line on paper, what will the UN monitor? Right? The purpose of UN according to Karachi Agreement was to monitor the ceasefire line. Understood? Now technically, legally speaking, there is no ceasefire line because we renamed it as LOC. So according to India, UN has no role to play. Even today, the military observer group is stationed, it is present in Jammu and Kashmir, in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but on the Indian side, it has no role to enforce the ceasefire. It just has a nominal presence in Jammu and Kashmir. So we have taken out the third party involvement and we made the Kashmir issue a bilateral issue, thus cutting off any third involvement in this conflict. This was a major development because of the Shimla Agreement. All right, these are the key points that you need to remember. This is how the war ended with the liberation of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh became independent. Now, I'm sure many of you would have a question. Many of you would have the same question. You would be asking, if we had all the leverage against Pakistan, why didn't we move on Kashmir? Why didn't we capture POK? Wasn't this the right opportunity to capture POK, to settle the Kashmir conflict as well? Because Pakistan was literally on its knees. We had brought down the country to its knees. We had all the advantages. We had all the leverage going in our favor. So most of you will be asking, I'm sure, why didn't we recapture POK? Why didn't we extend the war? Why didn't we take Kashmir as well and settle the conflict forever? Let me explain this after a break. All right, it's a very important, a very interesting discussion. Right? So let's look at this in detail after a short break. Let's take a 15 minutes break. It's 7:50. Let's come back at 8:05. Is it fine? So 15 minutes, we'll come back and then we'll discuss why India didn't or why India couldn't move over the Kashmir issue as well. And after that, we'll cover the remaining topics and we'll try to wrap up India-Bangladesh. So see you at 8:05. As well. So for Nepalis, we have extended national treatment through the Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. First, let me take a look at all your doubts, all your questions, and then I'm going to proceed with the discussion. First question is from Utkarsh. So yesterday you said Nepal have the same job opportunities as Indians, but according to Article 16, no foreigner is allowed for the same. So how is it possible? Yes, Article 16 provides the government to restrict the right to employment. However, we can make exceptions as well. So for Nepalis, we have extended national treatment through the 1950 treaty, and we can make them eligible for government jobs as well in India. That would not be a violation of Article 16. Vishnu is asking why the present day Pakistan and Bangladesh are poles apart. That's a very good question actually. See, today Pakistan and Bangladesh are very different, right? That's because of the ideological difference again. Pakistan has always placed its faith on adopting religion, promoting radicalism, extremism. Pakistan has consumed itself with extreme religion. Bangladesh has a clear tilt towards secularism. In Bangladesh, there is a divide. There are few sections which are pro-radicals and extremists, but majority of the people in Bangladesh, the party, especially Awami League, which has been in power since the last 15, 16 years, has always promoted secularism and a united society of Bangladesh. It has tolerated different faiths, different religions, it has protected different communities. So that is one reason why you find that today's Bangladesh is very different from Pakistan. But later, we will discuss a phase in the history of Bangladesh, where you will see that even Bangladesh was affected by radical extremism. There are strands present even today. There are sections in Bangladesh which still support radical religious ideology. There is a divide, a split in Bangladeshi society. So there was a point where Bangladesh was very similar to Pakistan in 1980s, especially during these 20 years. Bangladesh had fallen back. It had become another Pakistan, another version of Pakistan. Now Bangladesh is different because of the leadership, because of the politics. The Awami League, which is in power, and we have a friendly government in place, plays a critical role in ensuring Bangladesh remains secular and stable. That is the fundamental difference you find between Pakistan and Bangladesh. Akhil is asking, can we mention such facts in our answers that are not acknowledged by the government? I've already mentioned this in my previous discussions. Whenever we talk about India's covert involvement in another country, of course, you won't be able to write about it in your exams. But for your clear understanding in the class, it's essential to talk about every aspect. Now, if I don't explain the covert war, right, you'll only have a partial understanding of India's involvement in Bangladesh, in liberating Bangladesh. So since the covert involvement is never acknowledged by the government, you won't be able to write about it directly. But however, what you can do is, you can say that it has been said that India played a covert role as well in assisting the liberation of Bangladesh. It's not your opinion. You're placing it on a third opinion, a third party opinion. There are many written accounts. There are a lot of evidence available to suggest that yes, India did get involved covertly as well to back the liberation movement. We did train and support the Mukti Bahini. So instead of writing it as your opinion, you can say that it has been said, it has been reported that India did support the Mukti Bahini rebels. So there was some covert support extended by India. because there can be a question on the liberation of Bangladesh. In fact, UPSC has already asked a question on this topic. A few years back in mains exam, UPSC had asked, explain the role India played in liberation of Bangladesh. You have to talk about the covert war, the background, and of course you will mention the covert involvement as well. But that will not be your opinion. You have to be very diplomatic, be careful, and mention that it's been reported, it's been said, it's been alleged that there was a covert support given as well. Then that statement will be fine. Zeba is asking why Wahhabis targeted Sunnis. See, Wahhabism is a radical strand within Sunni Islam. It's a misinterpreted version of Islam. Wahhabism, Salafism is the root of radical ideology. All right, it's widely promoted by some of the West Asian countries, especially Saudi Arabia, which sees itself as a leader of the Muslim world. But this is a misinterpreted version of Islam. And Wahhabism, Salafism is what promotes radicalism, extremism, and conservative ideology. So anyone who does not accept this strand of religion, right, they are treated as non-believers in countries like Pakistan, in countries like Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, etc. It's not just people of other religion who will be targeted, even other Muslims, be it Shias, Hazaras, even Sunni Muslims who don't accept Wahhabism, Salafism, which is a puritanical form of religion, right? Even they could be targeted and discriminated because they're not abiding by one rigid version of religion which is being promoted by the state. That is why even Sunnis could face targeted discrimination. Anubhav is asking, sir, you told SAARC is more significant than BIMSTEC, and by far what I understood presence of Pakistan in SAARC is what makes SAARC more significant. No, not really. I didn't tell you presence of Pakistan is what makes SAARC significant. What I told you was Pakistan is a key member of SAARC, right? Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, these are key members of SAARC. And if you have one country like Pakistan creating problems, derailing every initiative, then how will the group succeed? And also, please correct yourself. I didn't tell you SAARC is more important than BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC has its own importance, but in Bay of Bengal region. SAARC has its own significance in South Asia region. What I told you was BIMSTEC cannot replace SAARC for South Asia. Please understand the difference. BIMSTEC has its own relevance, it has its own significance, all right? But BIMSTEC cannot be a replacement for SAARC because it's not a true representation of South Asia. Ritu is asking why Pakistan was more important for Western countries. I'll come to it, I'll explain that. Next student says we can expect a question from Shimla Agreement as it has completed 50 years. Yes, definitely, very much possible. Because 2022 marked the 50th anniversary of Shimla Agreement. You can definitely expect a question from Shimla Agreement. That's why I discussed the key provisions. It's very important. Praveen is asking about the Treaty of Friendship with Russia in 1971. We're going to discuss that. That is the next discussion. Abhishek is asking why didn't Bangladesh accede to India after 1971 victory? See, Bangladesh never had any intention to join India. Bangladesh wanted its own country. The Bengali people wanted their own country, right? They wanted their own sovereignty to treat themselves equally, to give them the rights they deserve. They never had any intention of joining India. And also India never had any intention of occupying Bangladesh. We never had any objective to annex the country. It was very clear from the beginning that we are going to aid, we are going to help in the liberation of Bangladesh. Ms. Pai is asking, please clarify about the ceasefire. Please explain the ceasefire and benefit of this. As I told you, in 1947, when the war was brought to an end, India had taken the matter to the UN and we called for a ceasefire. All right, which means you end the war, you stop the war temporarily. And whatever positions you hold, that becomes the ceasefire line. This was formalized by the UN through the Karachi Agreement. The Karachi Agreement of 1949 gave formal status to the ceasefire line as the temporary border, the de facto border between India and Pakistan in Kashmir. And UN gave itself a role to monitor the ceasefire. So UN became a third party which got involved in the Kashmir conflict. Now we wanted to remove UN from this role. We were not comfortable in dealing with the UN. So we renamed the ceasefire line through Shimla Agreement. We renamed ceasefire line as LOC, line of control that you have today. All right. The positions are the same on the ground. Nothing has changed. But on paper, technically, legally, we have changed the name of ceasefire line to LOC, line of control. So this invalidates the role of UN under Karachi Agreement. If there is no ceasefire line to monitor, what will the UN monitor? That is the point here. All right. So ceasefire line has been renamed as line of control. Okay. So these are the questions. Now let's move on with our discussion. Let's talk about why India didn't make a move on Kashmir. Why didn't we use this opportunity? Why didn't we try and retake Pakistan occupied Kashmir? This is one of the most popular questions I get in every class because there is a lot of criticism against the Indira Gandhi government that we should have used this opportunity to leverage the Kashmir issue and take back POK. All right. This is a popular question which comes up. Let me tell you why this was not possible. It was not practical. It was not in India's interest. To understand this, you should look at the global context in which the 1971 war took place. The 1971 war was not just a regional war between India and Pakistan. It was not just limited to South Asia. It was fought in the middle of the Cold War, where the world was divided between the two superpowers, that is the US and the Soviet Union. Is that clear? The 1971 war had a clear global dimension. There was an involvement of global powers in this conflict. All right, there were severe restrictions and limitations on India. We had been operating in a very tight environment. There was a lot of pressure on India. We had to navigate this external pressure to ensure we won this war and liberated Bangladesh. Winning the war, defeating Pakistan and liberating Bangladesh in itself was a great victory for India. Because of all the restrictions of the Cold War, India couldn't make a move on Kashmir. It was out of the question. I'll explain this point wise. See, the United States had become a very, very close ally of Pakistan. Is that clear? I'll tell you why. As the Cold War began in 1949, 1950, as the Cold War had started, Pakistan had clearly aligned itself with Western countries, with UK and US. From the beginning, Pakistan was seen as a Western ally. It had made a choice during the Cold War. But India had remained non-aligned. We had championed the non-aligned movement. It was a critical foreign policy principle of India. We didn't want to choose sides between US and Soviet Union. We didn't want to contribute to more divisions in the world. So we laid the foundation of a third neutral ideology. We took the middle path with few other countries and we championed the cause of non-alignment. Is that clear? And the Americans never understood the non-aligned principle. Because in America's viewpoint, if someone is not with them, they assume that they are against them. This has always been a shortcoming of American foreign policy. Even today, if a country does not side with US, does not support what US is doing, right? They automatically assume that the country is against American interests. They don't realize there could be a third path, a third neutral path. So US always had a problem with India being non-aligned because they expected India to support Western countries, to blindly join the US power bloc because India was a democracy. But we could never do this. We could never choose sides, join these clubs and military alliances because we believed in a neutral world. We believed in a stable world. We didn't want to contribute to further escalation in global tensions. Cold War was a period of very high tensions between the superpowers. They were involved in a secret war around the world. It was geopolitical rivalry between US and Soviet Union, between the Western countries and the Eastern Bloc. So India was non-aligned, so naturally we weren't very close to the US. We had a basic relationship with US and a decent relationship with Soviet Union. We had maintained our distance from both and we had a basic decent relationship. But Pakistan was not like that. Pakistan had made a choice. It had chosen the Western countries, aligned with US and UK. It had even joined a military alliance with the United Kingdom and the Western countries. Is that clear? Along with this, Pakistan played a critical role for the US in re-establishing its relations with China. In late 1960s, it became a priority for the then US government to re-establish diplomatic ties with China. Because US had cut off all relations with China, it had cut off ties with China following the Tibet crisis, following the annexation of Tibet by China, following the violation of human rights China carried out against Tibetan Buddhists, especially in 1959. US had cut off all relations with China and it had no diplomatic ties with China. And don't forget, China is a communist country, clearly aligned with the Soviet Union. So US had broken all ties with China in 1950s. But now there was a change of mindset in the United States. In 1960s, US was under President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was the president and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger. They were running the foreign policy and the national security policy of the US in late 1960s. Now Nixon and Kissinger, they had a different thinking. They realized that if they rebuild ties with China, they could break the links between Soviet Union and China. And they also saw China as a massive market because China was looking at economic reforms. It was looking to open up its economy. And for the Americans, China represented a huge economic opportunity, a massive market. More importantly, they could separate China from the ideological connection with the Soviet Union. So Nixon and Kissinger had made it a priority to re-establish ties with China. This was a top foreign policy priority for the US administration. All right? Nixon and Kissinger, they loved everything about Pakistan. And they hated everything about India. This was their personal bias. This has been very well documented. The President of the United States and his national security advisor had a personal bias. They hated everything about India. They hated the fact that India was non-aligned, even though it was a democratic country. They hated the fact that India was ruled by a woman prime minister. They had personal hatred against Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. This has been very well documented in White House records, which were recently declassified. After many years, some White House documents are declassified. It brings out the conversation between Nixon and Kissinger. It shows the degree to which they hated India. It was almost racial hatred. All right? And they couldn't tolerate the fact that a large democratic nation was non-aligned. They assumed India was against Western interests. They couldn't tolerate the fact that Indira Gandhi was the prime minister. A woman was leading the world's largest democracy. All right? This personal hatred and bias existed, whereas they loved everything about Pakistan. The fact that Pakistan was largely controlled by the army. The fact that Pakistan had become a military state. And Pakistan was not hesitating to help US. So US was desperately looking for an opening with China, and Pakistan became the mediator for Nixon and Kissinger. The Pakistani army leadership was very close to China. The nexus between Pakistan and China was very well known. Both were very close to each other. The Chinese PLA, the Communist Party leaders, the General Secretary, the President, were very close to Pakistani leadership, especially the army leadership. So US relied on Pakistan's contacts to rebuild ties with China. It was a top priority for the US. Pakistan was basically mediating the re-establishment of diplomatic relations between US and China at this point of time. In 1968, 69, 1970. During these 2-3 years, Pakistan played a critical role in helping US to reach out to China. So naturally, Pakistan became their best friend, their ally in South Asia. Whereas they hated India, they hated everything about India. This had a direct role to play in the 1971 war. When India started destabilizing Pakistan by launching a covert war, later when we attacked Pakistan, when we countered Pakistan and went into a overt war, the US openly threatened India. Nixon and Kissinger wrote many letters to Indira Gandhi threatening India with consequences. This was not a hidden threat, it was an open threat. Along with this, the US started acting on it, and the American Navy pushed the 7th Naval Fleet into Bay of Bengal as a direct threat to India. So the US has a major naval presence in the Indian Ocean. In a later chapter, when we come to Indian Ocean region, I'll show you one island called Diego Garcia Island, where the US has a major military base. It's located to the south of Maldives. The US has a very big military base, a naval base, and from this naval base, the 7th Naval Fleet, which is an entire carrier battle group, was dispatched into Bay of Bengal to threaten the Indira Gandhi government. The threat was, US will not hesitate to go to war with India, to attack India, if Pakistan faces collapse. If Pakistan is on the brink of collapse, US might help Pakistan. To save Pakistan, it might go to war with India. Now see, please don't underestimate the power of the US Navy, the to a naval fleet, the to a carrier battle group. A carrier battle group is not just one ship. It's an entire fleet of ships and submarines. It is led by an aircraft carrier, is that clear? Which is equipped with nuclear weapons. And it will have an entire fleet of naval ships and submarines. Missile destroyers, supply vessels, minesweepers, submarines which are armed with nuclear weapons. So it contains an entire fleet of naval assets, which can impose a huge cost on any country. The US has that kind of military strength, military capabilities. There was no way India could have stood up to the military pressure that US was exerting on India. The US was a much more superior power even today and even back then. India had no way to stand up to the American military threat. So the carrier battle group was dispatched into Bay of Bengal. It was a shocker for India. India was tied. India's hands were tied. If we proceeded to break Pakistan, to liberate Bangladesh, the threat was the US might probably attack India. Right? See, whether the war might have happened or not is a different question. But the very possibility that US was threatening India with military consequences was enough to restrain India and constrain India's options. Now, this was a critical juncture in the war. At this point, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi made a landmark decision. India made a major shift in its foreign policy under American threat as US became hostile to India. It was very clear. Now US was a hostile power targeting India, threatening India. India realized there was no point in remaining non-aligned. We needed support at the global level, and we aligned with the Soviet Union. India entered into a treaty, the 1971 Treaty of Peace and Friendship with the Soviet Union. This was seen as a diplomatic masterstroke from the Indira Gandhi government. We abandoned non-alignment, which was a core principle of India's foreign policy. We gave up non-alignment for the first time because of America's hostility, and we sided with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union promised support. It promised to come to India's help if necessary to deter the American threat. All right? So this factor played a critical role in allowing India to continue the war to push back the American pressure and go ahead and break Pakistan and liberate Bangladesh. The Soviet backing was absolutely crucial for India. All right. According to several reports, there are many credible reports available today. A lot of former officers, former experts have written about this event. It's a very huge development. So there's well-established reports that Soviet Navy had already been deployed in the Indian Ocean. As the tensions were escalating, as India was getting closer to Soviet Union, even before the treaty was signed, even before the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was signed, the Soviet Union had already dispatched its Navy to counter the American naval deployment. All right, basically the Soviet vessels, they were tailing the American naval vessels in Bay of Bengal around the Indian Ocean region. This pushed the US back. It pushed the US to back off because now this was turning into a potential US-Soviet Union conflict. And that was the last thing US or Soviet Union wanted. Just years before this, they had almost exchanged nuclear missiles with each other during the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1962, US and Soviet Union had come very, very close to the brink of nuclear war. They would have annihilated each other. They would have bombed each other with nuclear weapons during the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right? The crisis was averted at the last minute. This is something you will study in world history. All right? So tensions were very high between US and Soviet Union already. So they didn't want to risk any further escalation. So as Soviet Union stepped in and backed India, the US backed off. Both the sides took a step back because they didn't want this regional war to escalate into an unnecessary global war. Any such conflict would potentially have a nuclear consequence. All right? So it was under these circumstances that the 1971 war was fought. The Soviet protection gave India that additional shield to proceed with the war to break Pakistan and to liberate Bangladesh. All right? So this Soviet support was obviously conditional. If India had used this opportunity to go and occupy Kashmir, not Soviet Union, no one else would have backed India. There are many factors you need to understand. See, when we started supporting the Bengali liberation movement, what was the primary motive? The primary motive, it was a moral duty, a humanitarian obligation that we were fulfilling. We were not looking to occupy East Pakistan. We had made this very clear. This is one reason why we got some global support from other countries. Many countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, they all supported India during the war because they saw that India was acting in a selfless manner. We were not driven by any selfish interest. We were not just looking to break Pakistan or occupy East Pakistan. This was not our purpose. Our primary intention was to help the Bengalis who were facing a genocide. This is where our diplomacy played a critical role. MEA played a critical role. We provided evidence to all the global capitals. We reached out to almost every government, gave evidence. Our ambassadors, high commissioners, they would meet the foreign leaders, highlighting what Pakistan was doing. Right? Even at the UN, we brought up the issue to show what Pakistan was doing. And we managed to get a lot of global support. The global sympathy was in favor of India. It was in favor of the Bengali minorities. This image creation was very, very crucial, very, very important. If we had proceeded against Kashmir, the world would have seen this as a selfish interest of India. All right? This war was never about Kashmir. This war was about Bangladesh. It was about the people of Bengal. If India had diverted its focus and attention, we might very well have lost the global support, the goodwill we had, and Soviet Union also wouldn't have extended the support to India. Why would Soviet Union risk further escalation for India's selfish interests? Why would Soviet Union risk a possible war with Western countries for the sake of India and for its self-interest? Soviet Union would have never done that. The Soviet support was conditional, that we limit the conflict to East Pakistan. Once it is liberated, the job is done. All right? India had made it clear that we are not looking to annex the East Pakistan territory. We'll ensure it is liberated, we'll retreat. We'll allow East Pakistan to become a new independent country. This was the firm stand India had taken. If we had made any other move, either to occupy East Pakistan or to make a move on Kashmir, we would have lost the global support, the Soviet support, and the image of India would have been destroyed. We would have become the aggressors. Right? We would have served the purpose, the propaganda of Pakistan. And more importantly, the capabilities of Indian forces were also limited. Don't forget that. Today, you might have modern armed forces. Even then, we had a conventional edge over Pakistan, but doesn't mean we had tremendous capabilities. Right? Our armed forces had limitations. By fighting this short war, India had already drained its resources. Right? Extending the war to POK would mean dragging the war. Pakistan wouldn't give it up so easily. The war would have continued. Please remember, Pakistan had surrendered only in East Pakistan. The war would have dragged and continued, thereby imposing a huge economic cost on India. Right? There was no guarantee, no conclusive victory ahead for India. Moreover, our own forces, right, they would have been demoralized fighting a prolonged war. And it was also a question of resources, weapons capabilities, and fighting a war in POK, which is much difficult, harsher terrain compared to East Pakistan. All these factors have to be kept in mind before making allegations that we should have taken POK. It was never in the question. It was never practically possible, nor was it the right thing to do at that point. It would have curtailed our options, limited our options, and we would have lost the global support. Our global image would have been hampered, and also the war would have prolonged unnecessarily. Right? We may never have achieved a concrete result. The war would have dragged, demoralizing our own forces, leading to further economic cost and human cost on India. We had already paid enough for Pakistan's mistakes. There was no point in further escalating this or diverting this conflict towards Kashmir. This war was about East Pakistan, not about Kashmir. These are the reasons why India had no intention to occupy POK. It was never in the question. It was neither practically possible. All right? You need to understand all these details without being driven by emotions. It's very easy to sit now and say, yes, we should have taken back POK. But in reality, things don't work like that. Right? Geopolitics is not so simple. So you need to be aware of all the finer details, the complications that were involved in this war, the pressure that India was under. Keeping all of this in mind, India did a fine job of liberating Bangladesh. We achieved a clear-cut victory. In fact, even big powers like US had never achieved such a victory. All right? It's not easy for defeating an entire country and breaking it into two parts. Even big powers like US, Soviet Union had never done that. So this was an incredible success for India. That is how India played a direct role in liberating Bangladesh. Right? So all these points that I've discussed, they are very, very important, especially for your mains. It's not too important for your prelims. It's a very old topic, but very relevant for your mains. There could be a number of questions related to the liberation of Bangladesh war. We've already got a question on India's role. You can expect questions on Shimla Agreement. You can expect questions on the global context in which the war was fought, right? The impact of Cold War on the 1971 war, right? So that is something you should be prepared for, all right? Now, let's see what happened after this. Let me give you a brief summary of India-Bangladesh relations. So now, Bangladesh was independent. It was a free country. Awami League came to power. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the leader, became the founding father of Bangladesh. He had successfully led the people of Bangladesh to victory, liberated the country from the clutches of Pakistan, and had secured independence for the country. So Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had become widely popular. His popularity had grown even more, and he was considered as a founding father of Bangladesh. So Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was always grateful to India. Awami League was always grateful to India. They knew the contribution of India, the support India had given. We had very close contacts with Awami League and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. In fact, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Pranab Mukherjee at that point was playing a key role. And many other top Indian leaders, Indian officials, they were very close to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. They had very good personal connection with the leaders of Bangladesh. So naturally, Bangladesh was grateful to India and very close relations started developing. Very close and friendly relations started. But unfortunately, it remained for a very short period. It hardly existed for 2 to 3 years, from 1971 to around 1974. This was a period of friendly relations when Awami League remained in power, when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was the leader. All right. The people of Bangladesh were grateful to India, majority of them, right? They knew India's contribution. That's why India was celebrated in Bangladesh. Even today, you have sections in Bangladesh who are grateful to India for the support we gave during the Liberation War. Awami League and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman were always grateful for India's efforts. So naturally, close relations started, and we were eagerly looking forward to resolve many important issues. For example, the support for Northeast insurgency. This was a priority issue for us because when East Pakistan existed, we never got support from Pakistan to tackle the threat. In fact, Pakistan was sponsoring few Northeast insurgent groups. We wanted to resolve the Ganga water sharing issue. We wanted to resolve the land boundary issue. All these were pressing challenges. All these were priority issues for India. We had never found a solution to these issues because of Pakistan's hostility towards India. So when East Pakistan existed, none of these issues could be addressed. India was very eager, now that we had a friendly government, we were hoping that all these problems will be tackled immediately. In fact, initial agreements were also signed. An agreement was signed for Ganga water sharing. An agreement was signed for resolving the land boundary issue we had. So friendly relations did start out. Bangladesh started helping India from a security point of view as well to tackle the threat of Northeast insurgency. But this relationship was broken in the initial stages itself. Within 2-3 years, this close friendly relations were broken, disrupted because of the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The leader was assassinated. Awami League was thrown out of power and the military captured power in the country. The Bangladeshi army, which was still loyal to Pakistan, which was influenced by radical extremist thoughts, which still contained anti-India feelings, carried out a major coup in the country. It was nothing short of a military coup. Is that clear? Within the Bangladeshi army and the society, there were few radicals who were still loyal to Pakistan. They never wanted Bangladesh to break apart. Majority of the Bangladeshi society were in favor of independence, were in favor of India. Right? Awami League represented them, the majority of the population of Bangladesh. But few sections of Bangladeshi society were inclined towards radicalism, towards Pakistan's ideology. They remained loyal to Pakistan even after independence. Many such elements were present within the army itself, and they managed to stage a coup. They assassinated Sheikh Mujibur Rahman with the backing of Pakistan. Obviously, Pakistan wanted revenge. Pakistan's biggest humiliating moment was 1971. The defeat, the breakup of the country was its most embarrassing, humiliating moment. It had sworn to take revenge against both India and Bangladesh. So the ISI ensured that it would infiltrate Bangladesh, it would use the army itself to target Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and he was assassinated. Is that clear? In fact, India was protecting Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We were passing intelligence. We had prevented many assassination attempts in the past. We were protecting the family of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the top leaders of Awami League. India's RAW was playing a role in protecting Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We had successfully prevented many assassination attempts. But finally, Bangladeshi army succeeded. They toppled the government throughout Awami League, and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and most of his family and most of the leaders, they were all assassinated by the Bangladeshi army. Understood? Very few survived this attack in Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's family. Right? One of them who survived the attack was Sheikh Hasina, his daughter, who was a young student at that point studying in Europe. So she survived along with her sister, and later India protected Sheikh Hasina. Sheikh Hasina grew up in India later under India's protection, and later grew to become the leader of Awami League, and today is the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. That is why Sheikh Hasina is so friendly towards India, and the Awami League, which is back in power today, is always friendly towards India. Because India not only helped the country, we have personally helped the family of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We have directly played a role in protecting Awami League. We have brought up Sheikh Hasina by protecting her and her family, whoever remained after this assassination attempt. Right? So this was a turning point. Very quickly, we lost all the gains. It was a huge setback for India because Pakistan succeeded again. It took away the control we had, the influence we had, and the military captured power in the country. For more than 25 years, for almost 3 decades, Bangladesh became hostile to India. Is that clear? Bangladesh became hostile to India from 1974 to almost 2009. Bangladesh became a headache, a new problem for India. All the challenges, the issues we had, they became even bigger challenges for us. All right? I'm going to discuss one by one what kind of problems we faced during these hostile governments. We had military dictatorship until 1991. From 1974 to 1991, there was military rule. Bangladeshi army ruled the country. It was a dictatorship, and it remained hostile to India. It was acting in favor of Pakistan. All right? Then, from 1991 to 1996, a party known as BNP came to power, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is a right-wing party, again aligned with Pakistan, and it supports anti-India outfits. In 1991, the military stepped aside. It allowed democracy to be restored, all right, because it was under a lot of global pressure. So, for almost 16 years, it was a military dictatorship. Later, it transitioned into a democracy, but this was again no good news for India, because the party which won the election was a right-wing conservative party, which was opposed to India, which was aligned with Pakistan. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party is a threat for India. It has acted against Indian interests. All right. The only break we got was in 1996. Awami League came to power under Sheikh Hasina for one term. For a short period, there was a slight improvement because Sheikh Hasina managed to bring her party back to victory. She had entered politics again. She had a huge sympathy wave in favor of her. She won the elections, but however, it was not with full majority. It was not a full strong government. So Awami League was friendly to India always, but we couldn't achieve much progress. We only signed the Ganga water sharing treaty in 1996. We signed the water sharing treaty to resolve some differences we had over sharing of the Ganga river. Right? So there was some progress, but it was not enough to repair the relationship. There were many key problems which Sheikh Hasina could not address because she wasn't heading a strong enough government. All right? It's not that Sheikh Hasina didn't want to. Awami League, Sheikh Hasina, they've always been friendly to India, but they couldn't help India in any way because the government itself was a weaker government. Again, the BNP came back to power from 2001 to 2006. So again, the hostile relationship continued. All right, Bangladesh became a nightmare for India. Then there was an internal crisis. There was a constitutional crisis in the country where there was a divide between the secular factions and the radical factions. This has always been a split in the Bangladeshi society. Secular factions are supported by Awami League. All right, they support Bangladesh, the creation of Bangladesh. They fought for the independence of Bangladesh, so they are in favor of India. The secular elements, right? They are represented by Awami League and all the secular factions. They are in favor of India. The radical factions, they've always been in favor of Pakistan. They've always been in favor of extremism, and they've taken positions against India. They have even rejected the liberation of Bangladesh. The radicals who are there even today, they don't accept the liberation of Bangladesh. They have this desire to reunite Bangladesh with Pakistan. All right, this has been a fundamental split, a divide in Bangladeshi society. Majority of them are secular. They are pro-India. Awami League is one of them. But there are radical factions which are Pakistan. They keep promoting anti-Indians and they keep favoring Pakistan. I'll just give you one example. See, during 1971, Pakistani army had committed atrocities, war crimes, genocide had been committed. So after Bangladesh was liberated, war crime investigations were opened against many Pakistani leaders and officials who had ordered all these attacks. Many were being tried. They had to be given the death penalty. But within Bangladesh, the split in the society was so strong that the radicals, they've opposed the trial of these war criminals. They've tried to protect the war criminals who have slaughtered thousands and thousands of people. Whereas the seculars wanted justice to be done, these war criminals to be punished and deliver the death penalty for them. This has remained a persisting issue. Even today, this issue comes up. Even today, there are a few war crime cases going on dating back to 1971. And every time a criminal is punished, it leads to violence and protests in Bangladesh. It leads to clashes between the secular elements and the radical elements. The radicals, they reject the liberation. They are in favor of Pakistan. They don't acknowledge the atrocities that have happened. They want the war criminals to be protected and shielded. These are the elements who are extremists, who are radical, who are pro-Pakistan. All right, this is a fundamental split, a divide in the Bangladeshi society. So essentially, from 1974, from mid-1970s to 2008, we didn't see any major improvement in our relations. We had these hostile governments. I'll show you what kind of problems came up. From 1974 to 1991, under the military rule. Then from 1991 to 1996, and 2001 to 2006, under BNP. Both the governments were extremely hostile to India. They gave complete support to anti-India outfits. They formed a safe haven for several Northeast insurgent groups. You will study more about this in internal security. All right? Many insurgent groups like NSCN, NDFB, ULFA, the All Tripura Tiger Force, they were all sheltered in Bangladesh. Even many jihadist outfits backed by Pakistan, such as Lashkar-e-Toiba, then Huji, Harkatul Jihad Islami, and a radical student organization called Jamaat or Jamaat-e-Islami. These are all radical organizations backed by Pakistan, and Bangladesh gave complete support to them. So they would set up a safe haven in Bangladesh with the support of the Bangladeshi government. The security forces would back them. Pakistan's ISI would play a direct role. So they were getting an easy flow of funds, weapons, and they could easily set up their training camps. They could run their training camps, take shelter away from India, and keep launching attacks against India. This was Pakistan's covert war against India. Right? This was directly supported by the Bangladeshi governments under the military dictatorship and also under the BNP. We proposed many initiatives. They were all derailed by Bangladesh. For example, we wanted to explore the oil and gas potential in Bay of Bengal. In Bay of Bengal, hydrocarbon reserves are present. All right, it's a shared resource between India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. We had proposed a trilateral pipeline, a trilateral gas pipeline to harvest hydrocarbon reserves from Bay of Bengal to benefit all the three countries. It was a major initiative we had proposed in 1990s, but it was derailed by Bangladesh. Bangladesh didn't show any interest. It tried to derail the project. It remained very close to Pakistan. There was a clear ideological connection, which meant Bangladesh became against India. It became anti-India. Transit access was denied for several years. We kept requesting Bangladesh to allow us to connect with Northeast India, but transit access was denied. Remember, I told you at the start, connectivity was a priority for us to link with Northeast India, and Bangladesh never gave transit access to India under these hostile governments. The border areas became very volatile, and we started facing many border security threats. This became one of the most challenging borders for India and remains a major challenge even today. All right. Now, if you look at this border, it's a highly porous border. India-Bangladesh border is highly porous. There are many gaps in the border because you have multiple rivers cutting through. You have hilly areas, forested areas. You also have densely populated areas near the border. So this creates many challenges. It's not easy to guard and protect this border. All right. Very soon I'll explain what kind of threats come from here, what kind of security challenges we have faced. But these hostile governments were supporting all the organized criminal groups. Organized crime was given complete support by the hostile governments. All right. And it's very important to understand that organized crime has a connection with terrorism and insurgency. Organized criminals, they have connections with terror groups and insurgents. They all share the same ecosystem. So wherever organized crime flourishes, you quite often see that money laundering, terror financing will also flourish in the same region. There's a common link between the three. So terrorism and insurgency will also flourish in areas where organized crime and money laundering is flourishing. So Bangladesh allowed this to happen. It gave complete support to all these groups. A lot of security threats came up from here for India, and it became a nightmare for India, a major security challenge. Most of the issues we had, the water sharing issues like the Teesta dispute, Farakka barrage dispute, the land boundary issue, none of the issues were resolved. None of the issues were resolved, and we started witnessing massive illegal migration from across the border. Is that clear? Because Bangladesh was struggling economically. Under these hostile governments, there was no focus on economic growth, no focus on economic development. So as a result, people of Bangladesh were struggling for a livelihood. Many of them, they would cross the border, they would exploit the porous nature of the border, they would come to India illegally in large numbers. From 1970s to almost 2010, India has received a large flow of illegal migrants, which has led to problems in Northeast India. It has become the root cause for tension, socio-ethnic tensions in Northeast India. It became one of the root cause for insurgency in Northeast India, especially in Assam and Tripura. All right? Like I said, you'll study more about this in internal security. In internal security, I'll explain this in more detail. We'll talk about groups like ULFA, ATTF, how they were formed as an opposition to illegal migration from Bangladesh. Is that clear? Illegal migration directly contributed to insurgency in Assam and Tripura. It created socio-ethnic problems in northeastern states, and it remains a problem even today. Northeast region was completely destabilized because of the support for insurgent groups. It was very easy from across the border to smuggle arms, weapons, money, and the terrorists as well. They could easily infiltrate into the Indian side. So this was the kind of relations we had. So Bangladesh became a nightmare for India. We lost all the influence, and Pakistan was taking its revenge. All right. The breakthrough for India was in 2009, following the internal constitutional crisis. In 2009, when fresh elections took place, there was a lot of support towards secularism. Right. Many people in Bangladesh, they were opposed to the radical groups. They all voted for Awami League and Sheikh Hasina, and she came to power with full majority this time. Sheikh Hasina brought a strong government, and since then she has not lost a single election. Since 2009, Sheikh Hasina has remained in power. She has won 3 consecutive elections since 2009. She has put Bangladesh on the path of development. Very soon, Bangladesh will be officially designated as a developing country. Is that clear? Designating Bangladesh as a developing country today from a least developed country. It has already been announced. It will happen very soon, officially by 2026. Bangladesh will formally become a developing nation from a least developed country. The credit goes to Sheikh Hasina. Under Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh has seen a lot of economic progress. All right? And Bangladesh has seen a lot of socio-economic development. That's very, very important. Bangladesh has tackled poverty. It has provided better education and healthcare. It has become a pioneer in the field of microfinance, in providing micro loans, small loans, especially to self-help groups, women groups. It has managed to create employment. The Grameen Bank, I'm sure you would have heard about it, or you would have heard about Mohammad Yunus, the popular economist from Bangladesh, who pioneered microfinancing, right? Grameen Bank even won the Nobel Prize for Economics, right? Because of the contribution in spreading microfinance in Bangladesh. So today Bangladesh has progressed. It has seen a lot of economic development, socio-economic progress. In fact, on many human development indicators, Bangladesh performs better than India. In terms of education, in terms of few other socio-economic indicators, Bangladesh actually performs better than India today. The credit goes to Sheikh Hasina and her government, headed by Awami League. This was a turning point in the relationship because as soon as she came to power with a full majority, she started helping India. The support of Bangladesh was critical to break Northeast insurgent groups. Northeast insurgency was targeted immediately. All the groups I was mentioning, they were decimated in Bangladesh. India and Bangladesh started working together. We started sharing intelligence. Bangladeshi security agency, security forces would start helping India finally because of the friendly government. Sheikh Hasina ensured that this would happen. All the safe havens that existed for these groups were destroyed. The funding support, the weapons, the shelter they were getting, it was eliminated by Sheikh Hasina. The top leaders were arrested and they were extradited to India. They were handed over to India. This is the prime reason why today Northeast region has stabilized. Today Northeast region is largely free from violence and insurgency. Most of these groups are talking to India. They're negotiating with India. For example, the Naga groups like NSCN are going through a peace process. They're negotiating with the Indian government. Groups like Ulfa have surrendered and even they're looking to negotiate with India. Bodo insurgency has come to a complete end. NDFP, which was a Bodo insurgent group, has surrendered. We have signed the 3rd Bodo Accord recently in 2020. We have brought Bodo insurgency to a complete end. Is that clear? This is something we'll study in detail in internal security. Don't worry right now. I'm sure some of you might be confused. What are these groups? What is this Bodo Accord? Don't worry. You just need the basic details here. This is international relations. You should just know how Bangladesh helped India to tackle insurgency. In internal security, we'll study this in detail. There we'll look at each insurgency separately. You'll understand about every insurgent group. Some of you might have attended those classes, right? So Bodo insurgency was neutralized recently. In 2020, it was brought to an end. This was possible because of the support Bangladesh gave to us. It destroyed the safe havens, ended all the support, and more importantly, the leaders were arrested and handed over to India. Top insurgents and terrorists like Ranjan Daimari, he was the head of NDFB, which is a Bodo insurgent group. Leaders of Ulfa like Arvind Rajkova, all right? Then the Isaac Mulwa leaders of NSCN, they were all arrested, handed over to India, which helped India to break the groups and force them to negotiate with India. So if today we have tackled Northeast insurgency by and large, if we have stabilized Northeast region, the credit goes to Sheikh Hasina and Bangladesh and the Awami League. It's because of their help that India's security interests have been protected. Border security has improved because we have better cooperation today from Bangladesh. Illegal migration has gone down due to improved economic growth in Bangladesh. The security threats along the border has come down drastically. All right, organized crime has been tackled to an extent. The security threats along the border has come down slightly. Border security has improved and illegal migration has gone down. Because see, on one hand, Bangladesh is thriving today. It has a better economy today, so people don't have the need to come to India to find a better job, a better livelihood. They don't have to take the risk of entering India illegally. So compared to the scale of illegal migration which was happening in 1970s, 1980s, today the scale of illegal migration has gone down drastically. After 2010, there's a major decline in illegal migration. Recently, the BSF, the Border Security Force, which is responsible for guarding this border, submitted a report to the Parliament of India. In this report to a parliamentary committee, the BSF has noted a major decline in illegal migration. At least a few lakh illegal migrants have entered India before 2010. But after that, there is a major drop in illegal migration. It's not come to an end, of course, but the scale has gone down exponentially. So the credit goes to the friendly government in Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina has acted against all the threats, including the pumping of FICN into India. FICN stands for Fake Indian Currency Notes. These fake Indian currency notes are printed by the ISI with the help of organized criminal groups. This has been a Pakistani obsession. Pakistan is obsessed with economically destabilizing India. It's waging an economic war against India as well. It prints Indian currency notes, and through organized criminal gangs, it tries to smuggle the fake notes into India. It will destabilize the Indian economy, right? It also enables terror financing. So it's a major threat, economic and security threat. And Pakistan has preferred 2 routes to push FICNs into India. One is Nepal, which we studied in the previous class, and the other is Bangladesh. Primarily, via Nepal and Bangladesh, Pakistan has pushed large volume of FICNs into India, which threatens our economy, right? So Bangladesh has really helped India to tackle all these threats. Because of the friendly government, the scale of organized crime, smuggling and trafficking, pushing of fake currency notes has gone down. The cross-border infiltration of insurgents and terrorists has gone down. The safe haven for these insurgent and terror groups has been destroyed, and illegal migration also has gone down. So that is why it's very, very important to have good relations with Bangladesh. In fact, amongst all the neighboring countries, Bangladesh really stands out as one of the most important neighbors for India. All right, because with regard to our sovereignty, our stability in Northeast India, with regard to all these security challenges, Bangladesh is very, very crucial. So India is grateful to Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League because it's due to the help extended by the Bangladeshi government that we have been able to achieve this success. All right, but of course, in diplomacy, nothing comes for free. Right? Diplomacy is all about reciprocity. Every country will have an expectation. Diplomacy is based on reciprocity. Please understand this. No one will do charity here, not even India. Every country is driven by its own self-interest. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're giving something to someone, they expect something back in return. That is how international relations work. So obviously, when Bangladesh was helping India with regard to our core matters and core issues, Bangladesh also had an expectation from India. Sheikh Hasina and her party Awami League, they had few basic expectations from India. Because even Bangladesh had a few issues, few concerns that had to be addressed. All right? Because when Sheikh Hasina is helping India with regard to our core interests, right? Our core interest was to tackle insurgency, tackle terrorism, tackle organized crime. And Bangladesh addressed all these issues without questions asked. Bangladesh helped us on all these issues. It's because of the support Bangladesh gave, we could tackle the security problems. So it fulfilled India's core interests. So naturally, Bangladesh would also expect something in return. Because even within Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina and Awami League will face questions. Right? Opposition parties will question the government, why are you helping India so much? What are we getting in return? Right? That's an obvious question in any country. Let's say today, India starts helping China unilaterally. Right? And if China keeps creating problems for India, right? There will be questions raised against the government, the public, the media, the opposition. They question the government, why are you helping this country? What are we getting in return? Similarly, Sheikh Hasina and Awami League will come under pressure. Even they should have something to show that this is the progress, this is the success we have achieved by helping India. These are our interests which have been helped, protected because of India's help. And two important issues for Awami League and Sheikh Hasina was the resolution of the Teesta dispute, the Teesta water sharing dispute and the land boundary agreement. These were priorities for Bangladesh. It was a political electoral priority, resolving the land boundary problem. All right. And second was resolving the Teesta water sharing issue. India had promised to fulfill both the commitments. The then Manmohan Singh government was eager to fulfill both the promises. We knew how important it was for Sheikh Hasina. We would only be returning the favor because Bangladesh had already proven itself. It had already helped India. We just had to return the favor by signing and finalizing these important agreements, the Teesta water sharing agreement and the land boundary agreement. Both the agreements were finalized by the Manmohan Singh government, but both the agreements could not be implemented. Is that clear? Both the agreements could not be implemented by India, and that is how we failed in upholding the promises, the commitments that we had made. Even today, the Teesta issue has not been resolved. Even under the Modi government, the Teesta water sharing agreement has not been signed. The agreement is ready, but it has not been signed. I'll explain why later. Land boundary issue was resolved later, but when the Manmohan Singh government couldn't fulfill the commitments, Bangladesh was disappointed. All right, this is what we need to understand. These are two important topics. The Teesta issue I'm going to explain separately. We'll look at all the water sharing issues we have at the end of this chapter. In the next class, when we come to the end of this chapter, we'll discuss the water sharing issues separately because we have multiple water sharing issues. So there I will explain what is the Teesta issue, what was the promise we made, what does Bangladesh want, why is Teesta River important, and why India could not fulfill the promise. We'll study that in the last part of this chapter. Okay, I'll take all the water disputes together at the end. It is one topic at the last. Now, let's focus on the land boundary issue. Let's understand what the land boundary issue is all about. It's also called the enclave issue. All right. This issue is again a relic of the colonial era. It was a hangover of the colonial policies. It was a colonial blunder which created this problem between India and East Pakistan, later between India and Bangladesh. See, when the partition happened between India and Pakistan, when Punjab and Bengal were partitioned, it was done by a commission called the Radcliffe Commission. The British, they appointed the Radcliffe Commission to draw the boundaries between India and Pakistan. So this border that exists today between India, Pakistan and India, Bangladesh, they are both referred to as the Radcliffe Line. The border which was drawn in Punjab and Bengal, which led to the partition of India, Pakistan, right? These borders are called Radcliffe Line. It was drawn by the Radcliffe Commission. So today the India-Pakistan border towards Punjab, Rajasthan and Gujarat, even that is the Radcliffe Line. And the India-Bangladesh border that you have today towards West Bengal, Assam, etc., even that is the Radcliffe Line, because both were drawn by the Radcliffe Commission. You can see that here in the map, this blue colored line here, the India-Bangladesh border, this is the Radcliffe Line, marking the boundaries between India and East Pakistan, or now it is between India and Bangladesh. The problem was, the Radcliffe Commission did a very shoddy job of drawing the boundaries. It was a very ad hoc job they did. They weren't thorough. The Radcliffe Commission did not employ the right methods. They used outdated maps. They didn't carry out any local consultations. They didn't meet the local people. They didn't meet other stakeholders. They sat in offices in Delhi, used old outdated maps, and drew lines, random lines sometimes, to draw the boundaries between India and Pakistan. This is how the British divided India and Pakistan. They have done this not just here, they have done the same in Africa and West Asia as well. Even today, there are pressing problems in Africa and West Asia because of the haphazard boundaries that they had drawn. All right? So this happens to be a colonial legacy, a colonial blunder, which affects today's geopolitics. So this random exercise that they carried out, without putting much thought into it, without consulting all the people, all the stakeholders, without using the right tools, maps and technology, right? It created a massive problem, a practical problem. What happened was they left behind a lot of enclaves on both the sides. Just look at the map here. This is West Bengal. This is Bangladesh after its independence, or before it was East Pakistan. You can see these patches of orange here. It is in Bangladesh, surrounded entirely by Bangladesh, but this is actually Indian territory. These are Indian enclaves, surrounded entirely by Bangladesh. Similarly, on the other side, towards the Indian border, you can see these green patches, green territories. These are actually Bangladeshi territories, before it was Pakistani territories. These Bangladeshi or Pakistani enclaves were surrounded by Indian territory. All right, this is called an enclave. Enclave is basically a small piece of foreign territory which is entirely surrounded by another country. Is that clear? It's like an island, a small Indian island surrounded by Pakistan or Bangladesh. It was Pakistan before, right? Later it became Bangladesh. So you had these Indian enclaves surrounded entirely by East Pakistan and later by Bangladesh. In total, there were 111 Indian enclaves, 111 Indian territories on the other side of the border. Next, there were 51 Bangladeshi enclaves on the Indian side. 51 Bangladeshi territories left behind on the Indian side. Now, this creates a massive problem. It creates a huge problem because accessing these enclaves becomes a problem for the government, for the administration. That too, when hostile relations are present between these countries, access to the enclaves becomes a problem, and as a result, welfare and administration will be compromised. How will you administer these areas? How will you govern these territories? So people of the region, they will suffer. So Indian citizens in these enclaves, they will suffer because the Indian government, the West Bengal government, the local administration, they can never reach out to provide the basic welfare benefits, to provide for governance and welfare and administration. These regions will become backward. They will not see any progress, any development. Same happens with Bangladeshi enclaves. Bangladeshi citizens will not get any benefit of welfare or governance because Bangladesh cannot access or reach these enclaves because these areas are surrounded by India. Right? Also, we had hostile relations. We had East Pakistan, which was hostile to India. We had Bangladeshi governments, which were hostile to India. Because of the hostility, because of all the security problems and threats, both sides will not give each other free access to reach the enclaves. So it becomes a practical problem. It becomes a nightmare to govern and administer these areas. And as a result, the people in these enclaves, they will suffer immensely. Understood? This is the land boundary problem we had. It's a British legacy that they left behind. Now, what is the solution? How do you resolve such an issue? There is only one solution here. All right? When such enclaves are present, there's only one practical solution. You have to exchange the enclaves, exchange the territory. Some of you might suggest, why don't we redraw the boundary? If this is the problem, why can't we alter the boundary line? See, that is one suggestion that many provide, but that is never possible because to redraw the boundary, it will involve a lot of give and take. Both sides will lose a lot of territory to each other. No one will agree to it. If the boundary line has to be redrawn to cover all the enclaves, one is practically impossible, and also one side might end up losing very large areas of territory to the other side. So no country will agree to it. It's not a practical solution. The only option is to exchange the enclaves permanently, to merge the enclaves into your own territory. And for this purpose, you need a land boundary agreement. To provide for the merger of these enclaves, to merge the enclaves into the territory of that country permanently, you need a land boundary agreement. Is that clear? In the case of India, it required a constitutional amendment. It required a constitutional amendment. Understood? A constitutional amendment becomes necessary to operationalize such an agreement. So India, Bangladesh, we had actually signed a land boundary agreement in 1970s. That was the initial agreement we had signed with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. But before it could be implemented, right, before we could bring that into action, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated, and the issue was never picked up again. So finally, when Sheikh Hasina came to power, when friendly relations were re-established, India, Bangladesh, they finalized the land boundary agreement. They provided for a practical solution to exchange the territories, to merge these enclaves into their respective countries permanently. And in net terms, India was supposed to give a small part of its territory to Bangladesh. All right. If you calculate the area of these enclaves and look at the difference, in net terms, India was giving away a small part of its territory to Bangladesh. Now, this was acceptable. This is perfectly fine. It's absolutely fine to give away a small part of your territory to resolve such a complex issue, right? When there are hundreds of enclaves affecting the lives of thousands of people, it's a very small price to pay. We wouldn't lose anything by giving away a small portion of our territory because you're allowing the merger of the territories. That is something which is not in the hands of anyone, right? Bangladesh can't be blamed, India can't be blamed for this. Practical option is just to merge the territories. So when you look at the area, the total area of these enclaves, the net calculation was that India would be giving away a small part of its territory to Bangladesh. We were absolutely okay with this. That is a practical solution. The Manmohan Singh government had finalized the agreement as well, signed the agreement, and we brought this to the parliament. Because see, in the Indian constitution, there is a provision. There's a provision which says that only the Parliament of India has the powers to cede Indian territory to another country. Is that clear? Does anyone know which provision is this? Does anyone know which provision in our constitution gives this power to the Parliament to cede Indian territory? This power is not with the government of India. Very good. Article 3. Article 3 is the right answer. Right? So under Article 3, it's the Parliament of India which is empowered to cede our territory. Government does not have the powers. Now, government cannot unilaterally give away our territory to some other country. That would be unconstitutional. All right? So Parliament has been vested with these powers, which means it requires a constitutional amendment with a special majority. Which means the government should have enough numbers in the parliament to get this amendment passed in the parliament. All right. So the Manmohan Singh government was more than willing to help Bangladesh because Bangladesh had helped us in every possible way to tackle all the problems we had, especially the insurgency in Northeast India. India just wanted to return the favor. The government of India brought out the agreement. We signed the land boundary agreement, and now we wanted a constitutional amendment to be done so that formally we could transfer this territory and exchange the enclaves permanently. But when the government brought this bill in the parliament, it was strongly opposed by the parties. This is where you have to understand the impact of coalition politics, domestic politics, and regional politics on India's foreign policy. Is that clear? There have been instances where India's foreign policy has been derailed. India's national interests have been compromised because of coalition politics, domestic politics, and regional politics. In this case, it was domestic politics mainly. Opposition parties politicized the issue. They projected this as if India was giving away territory to a foreign country. Right? They criticized the government for the deal and built a lot of political pressure, and the Manmohan Singh government couldn't go through with the amendment. Why? Because the Manmohan Singh government was a weak coalition government. Manmohan Singh government, the UPA 1 government, didn't have enough numbers in the parliament on its own. It depended on support from the outside, from other parties. It could never get special majority without the support of opposition parties, right? And all the opposition parties, they capitalized on the issue. They made it a political electoral issue, brought a lot of pressure, and this highlights the role of domestic coalition politics. Coalition governments are weaker governments. They're unstable. They could easily fall apart, right? And heavy politicization of every issue. If political parties exploit every issue, national interests will get compromised. There will be certain issues where the differences have to be forgotten. Political parties have to keep aside their differences in the larger interest of the country, in the larger national interest. But this did not happen in this case. A lot of drama was created, political drama was created around this amendment. There was strong opposition against the constitutional amendment, and even some of the coalition partners didn't support it, and eventually the weak government couldn't pass the constitutional amendment bill. All right. So this is an example of how coalition domestic politics can derail our foreign policy. This will keep coming up. We'll talk about the Teesta issue later. You will see how regional politics Regional domestic politics has derailed our ties with Bangladesh. Next, when we come to Sri Lanka, you will see how coalition regional politics from Tamil Nadu has derailed our foreign policy with Sri Lanka. These are important examples. Because see, foreign policy is a union subject. Union government has complete authority to control and run the foreign policy of the country, keeping the national interest in mind. States have no role in foreign policy. All right, under the 7th schedule, subjects have been clearly divided. Foreign relations comes under the union list. States have no role in foreign relations. However, we have a federal setup, so states will be consulted. The states which are getting affected by our agreements or deals with other countries, those states will be consulted by the center. The center will try to build consensus. Let's say we are signing a deal with Pakistan. Obviously, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, J&K, they'll all be consulted. They'll all be brought on board. If you're signing a deal with Bangladesh, we will consult, the union government will consult West Bengal, Assam, and all the border states. Because they have to come on board. Because they might be affected by these agreements. Since we have federal setup, the union government consults the state governments, takes their opinions, but it is not mandatory, it's not binding. Foreign policy is the sole jurisdiction of the union government. State governments, opposition parties, regional parties cannot dictate how India's foreign policy will be done. Right? They can't force the government. They can recommend, they can give advice, give suggestions. So government of India builds consensus, consults with them, but it's not binding on the government of India. In this context, India's foreign policy interests were compromised because of coalition domestic politics. Similarly, regional politics at the state level in West Bengal and Tamil Nadu has derailed our foreign policy with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. As we discussed, I'll give you more examples. This is the first instance. The land boundary agreement was derailed. We couldn't get it passed under the Manmohan Singh government because it was a weak government, a weak coalition government, and opposition parties did not give the support needed for a special majority. All right? So Bangladesh was not happy with India. Obviously, Bangladesh was disappointed. Even similarly, we couldn't fulfill the Teesta promise. So Bangladesh felt let down. It affected our ties with Bangladesh because Bangladesh had given us all the help, and yet we couldn't fulfill the return promises that were made. And interestingly, the same agreement, the same constitutional amendment was enacted in 2015 when the Modi government came to power. The Modi government had enough numbers in the parliament, right? It was not a coalition government, it was a stronger government. But the irony is that the same party had opposed it when it was in the opposition. Now, this is how domestic politics works. This is how domestic politics can derail our national interests. The agreement is exactly the same. Nothing has been changed. Word to word, the agreement, the constitutional amendment bill was the same. Previously, the BJP wouldn't back the bill for political reasons. That is the impact of domestic politics. See, here we are not bothered about which party did what. What did Congress do? What was the coalition government doing? What did BJP do? That is irrelevant for us. But you should understand the impact of domestic politics, coalition politics on foreign policy of India. Right? So that is an important topic for us. So the opposition party, then the BJP, did not back the bill for political reasons. It made it a huge issue unnecessarily. But when it came to power, the same bill, the exact same amendment was carried out, and thus the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act was enacted. The promise was fulfilled, but there was a cost. We had already disappointed Bangladesh, right? There was no reason to delay this. We could have done it many years before. But due to domestic politics, our relations, our interests with Bangladesh have been compromised. All right? That shows that the issue was entirely political. Like I said, there's no problem in giving a small part of your territory to resolve this complex issue. Everyone knew this, but still political parties exploited this for their electoral politics. That is how domestic politics can derail our foreign policy initiatives. All right? So that is something you should keep in mind. Again, it doesn't matter which party did what. In the exam, you need not mention the names of the parties. You can just talk about how the land boundary agreement was derailed because of domestic politics due to lack of support, how the same bill was enacted, giving us the 100th Constitutional Amendment. To this, we fulfilled the promise and we have resolved the land boundary issue today. All right? So all the Indian enclaves, they have merged with Bangladesh permanently and vice versa. All Bangladeshi enclaves in India, they have merged with India. All right? But how about the people? The people have been given a choice regarding their citizenship. Because see, these people have suffered immensely. They have spent generations together in these enclaves, right? They've never seen development progress. So it's not good to push them to opt for a certain citizenship. That's why both the countries took a humanitarian stand. They have given the choice to the people. The people residing in these enclaves, they can decide. They can remain where they are, which means they will have to change their citizenship. For example, let's say there's a Bangladeshi enclave which has merged with India. The people here are Bangladeshi citizens. So if they stay here, they have to change the citizenship to Indian citizenship. India will give them citizenship. Or if they want to retain their citizenship, they have to move back to their country. They have to leave everything behind, go back to Bangladesh. Similarly, Indians who want to retain their Indian citizenship, they have to move out of Bangladesh and come back to India. But the choice was left to the people. Either you stay where you are, because that is their life. They've been born here, brought up here, right? Their whole life has been spent here. If they want to remain where they are, they can. All right, but they have to change the citizenship. If they want to retain the citizenship, they have to move out. They have to leave everything behind and go back to their country. So that is a flexible arrangement that was given, keeping the interests of the people in mind. They were also given a rehabilitation package. Both the sides provided financial incentives, gave them jobs and homes, because people who leave behind everything, they will lose everything. Right? They'll not have a job, they'll lose their property, no home to stay. So the government's promised to take care of this. If people are moving back, right, they are given financial incentives. A job is arranged by the government. A house is built for them. Financial support is given for them. So such a rehabilitation was promised, and we have fulfilled this commitment. And today the land boundary agreement has been fully implemented. Is that clear? Over the last few years, it has been fully implemented, and today the land boundary issue does not exist anymore. There are no enclaves anymore. The whole process has been completed. All the Bangladeshi enclaves in India have merged with India. Most of them have opted for Indian citizenship. All the Bangladeshi Indian enclaves in Bangladesh, they've all merged with Bangladesh. Some people have moved back, but some of them have opted for Bangladeshi citizenship. So today we have fully settled this issue. We have even given the rehabilitation support to the people who have been affected. Both India and Bangladesh have given the support that was promised to these families. So that is how we resolved this crisis, which was pending from 1947. It was finally resolved by 2018, 2019. The whole process was completed, and these enclaves, they don't exist anymore. All these Bangladeshi enclaves have become Indian territory. They have merged with West Bengal. All these Indian enclaves have merged with Bangladesh. All right. So the whole issue has been settled and resolved, and this is a major development that happened a few years back. So on this note, I would like to end my discussion for today. We have almost completed the chapter. There are a few